Who exactly was Asenath, and what explains why history has almost completely wiped away the narrative of one of the most powerful women from biblical history? While countless millions are familiar with Joseph's journey from slavery to becoming Egypt's ruler, very few understand that supporting his achievements was an Egyptian spouse whose personal narrative contains mysteries that might revolutionize everything you believed about this biblical figure. Right now, we're revealing the full hidden narrative of Asenath, the overlooked spouse whose background, spiritual transformation, and influence in forging Israel's destiny has remained concealed in open view for thousands upon thousands of years. But first, if this channel is new to you, think about pressing that like button and hitting subscribe if you're not already following us. Your engagement allows us to keep delivering these kinds of videos to you. Additionally, share with us your location and current time. We're creating a worldwide community right here. So with that said, let's get started, okay? In the magnificent narrative of ancient Egypt, where pharaohs governed as divine beings and pyramids reached toward the heavens, one woman's identity echoes through history like grains of sand slipping between your fingers. Her narrative starts in obscurity, even though her existence shone with sacred radiance. Asenath. The way her name sounds is like liquid gold, rich and smooth. Still, ask the average person about Joseph's spouse, and they hesitate. They recall the multicolored garment. They bring to mind the prophetic visions of healthy cattle and starving cattle. The well, the dungeon, the royal residence appear in their imagination like moments from theatrical performance. However, the woman who remained at the side of the Hebrew administrator, who gave birth to his children and occupied his chambers, stays cloaked in enigma. This quietness holds significance in a reality where male accomplishments reverberate across centuries. Female narratives frequently diminish to faint sounds. Asenath's narrative endured, though just barely. Concealed within neglected manuscripts, dispersed across early fragments, her account awaits retelling once more. She represented far more than a minor detail in Joseph's narrative. Past the straightforward statement, Pharaoh provided Joseph with a spouse. Exists a woman of substance and spirit, of anxieties and belief, of change that disturbed the very foundations of two civilizations. Her union connected kingdoms. Her spiritual shift altered history's trajectory. Her male children became ancestors of entire tribes. The early writers inscribed her identity with deep respect. Asenath, child of Potipharah, religious leader of An. Every word contains hidden meanings. Child of influence, offspring of the solar deity's servant, wife to the Hebrew interpreter of visions, mother to half of Israel's tribal families. But who was she prior to the marriage? What aspirations occupied her dreams? Which deities received her devotion in the sacred courtyards of Heliopolis? The accepted scriptures remain quiet. They provide us with identities, chronologies, family lineages. They confirm her existence, yet not her true self. Fortunately, additional narratives survived. Within scripture's margins, early narrators maintained her interior reality. They documented her physical appearance, her self-regard, her religious turmoil. They preserved her words, her sorrow, her evolution from Egyptian temple servant to Hebrew founding mother. These neglected manuscripts create portraits in brilliant gold and deep shadow. They reveal to us a woman of layers, suspended between civilizations, molded by powers outside her influence, though ultimately selecting her personal direction. Her narrative opens like an ancient scroll, exposing layer after layer of significance. At surface level, she seems like a political arrangement, an offering from Pharaoh to guarantee devotion. Yet deeper movements flow under this appearance. Her union symbolizes the merging of philosophical traditions, the convergence of belief in one God with timeless secrets, the emergence of fresh opportunities. The writers of these concealed manuscripts grasped something meaningful. They perceived in Asenath's narrative a reflection for every person's passage from shadow to illumination. From honoring creation to honoring the Creator, her evolution became their personal journey, her challenges their roadmap. Still, As these manuscripts maintained her words, time fought against her remembrance. Hundreds of years went by. Kingdoms ascended and collapsed. Fresh narratives captured interest, while ancient ones accumulated layers of neglect. The accepted scriptures concentrated on the males who molded history, leaving minimal space for the females who molded the males. This erasure wasn't random. It mirrored patterns as ancient as human society itself. Female narratives, when they endured at all, frequently became oversimplified, depleted of complexity and richness. They transformed into representations instead of humans, purposes instead of personalities. Asenath experienced this destiny. She became the foreign spouse, the parent of Ephraim and Manasseh, the religious leader's child. Each description held reality, yet none seized the completeness of her being. None exposed the woman who grappled with belief, who confronted would-be killers, who selected love instead of security. The rediscovery of her narrative in modern times has started restoring her presence. Academic researchers have assembled pieces, analyzed ancient texts, followed the development of her legend across various cultures and eras. What surfaces is a depiction of extraordinary complexity and magnificence. She occupies the intersection of history, where Hebrew culture encounters Egyptian civilization, where belief encounters custom, where the individual transforms into the political. Her decisions create ripples across generations, influencing not merely her direct family, but the complete future of the Israelite nation. The manuscripts portray her as stunningly beautiful, with complexion like precious metal and hair like solar rays. Yet her authentic beauty resided deeper in her ability for transformation, her readiness to challenge everything her upbringing taught her, her bravery to welcome a fresh comprehension of the sacred. Her narrative disputes assumptions regarding ancient females. She wasn't submissive, not simply a container for male goals. She was an engaged contributor in her personal evolution, a woman who struggled with heavenly messengers and came out triumphant. The Egyptian noble who at first refused the Hebrew administrator transformed into the devoted spouse who backed his mission. The religious leader's child, who formerly honored Ra, transformed into the parent who instructed her male children regarding the God of Abraham. The woman who started in self-importance concluded in modesty, not as surrender but as understanding. Her influence continues in surprising locations. Each time somebody selects belief instead of custom, love instead of security, transformation instead of ease, they mirror her choice. Each time somebody connects separate realms, they emulate her model. Each time somebody changes their comprehension of the sacred, they follow her route. The quietness that encircles her identity in widespread awareness points to broader patterns of erasure. It shows us that the most significant narratives aren't necessarily the most prominent ones, that the most meaningful transformations frequently occur in the peaceful intervals between major events. As we start to reveal her narrative, we recover something valuable. We bring back a presence that was never intended to stay quiet. We recall a woman who merits remembrance. We find that the overlooked spouse was never overlooked by the one who counts above all. Her narrative awaits us, patient as the wilderness, lasting as the ancient monuments, magnificent as dawn over the Nile. Let us pay attention with receptive spirits to the account of Asenath, the fierce one who discovered her power, the child who discovered her true parent, the spouse who discovered her purpose. Egypt during the era of Joseph. The morning star ascends above the Nile like a deity waking from slumber, coloring the waterway golden and the wilderness crimson. This is Egypt during Joseph's time, a territory where sacred authority moves through mortal vessels, where the pattern of seasonal flooding decides the destiny of kingdoms. The Middle Kingdom reaches its peak, a society that has perfected the skill of converting wilderness into cultivation, disorder into structure. Beside the waterway's edges, urban centers ascend like precious stones, arranged along a verdant thread: Memphis, Thebes, and toward the north, the holy city of An, where the solar god Ra accepts his morning tributes. An is beyond the city. It functions as the core of Egyptian spirituality, the location where paradise connects with earth each sunrise. The Greeks will name it Heliopolis, settlement of the sun. Yet to the Egyptians, It carries the burden of universal importance. In this place, the religious leaders measure time's passage, monitoring the trajectories of celestial bodies and natural cycles with exactness that challenges the deities. The sacred complex controls the terrain, its tall monuments extending skyward like stone digits. These structures bear holy inscriptions, picture writing that recounts the narrative of universal beginning, of Ra's morning passage through the firmament, of the perpetual conflict between structure and disorder. Inside these barriers, the religious hierarchy possesses authority that competes with Pharaoh's own. They manage not merely religious observances, but enormous riches, farming territories, and the instruction of the privileged class. The religious leader of An stands within the uppermost levels of Egyptian civilization, surpassed only by the royal bloodline in status and power. Into this realm of timeless authority and sacred rulership arrives something unprecedented. The Hebrew nation, children of Abraham, carry with them an alternative comprehension of the sacred. They discuss one God, unseen yet omnipotent, who functions through historical events instead of natural forces, who selects servants instead of requiring adoration. The friction between these perspectives forms the setting for our account. Egypt, assured in its deities and customs, faces Israel, fervent about its agreement and mission. The convergence of these two nations will transform both. Yet the price will be calculated in personal existences, in individual battles, in the silent conflicts waged within human spirits. The Nile's waters observe these shifts. Annually it overflows and withdraws, delivering vitality to the wilderness, allowing the greatest society on earth to thrive. The Egyptians perceive in this pattern the validation of their deity's authority, the proof that their comprehension of the sacred mirrors ultimate reality. However, the waterway also delivers unpredictability. Certain years the overflow arrives too soon or too delayed, too elevated or too minimal. These fluctuations demand oversight, preparation, the type of understanding that can read signs and arrange for what's coming. This requirement for sacred direction forms chances for those capable of reading the vocabulary of prophetic visions and revelations. The royal environment of the Middle Kingdom prizes learning and sophistication. The monarch's assembly draws intellectuals, creative minds, and governmental officials from throughout the recognized realm. Understanding moves like wine at a celebration, combining Egyptian understanding with outside perspectives, forming fresh opportunities for comprehension and development. Still, under this refinement exists an inflexible social framework. Origin decides fate for most individuals. The farmer's son turns into a farmer. The religious leader's daughter performs service in the sacred building. The enslaved person's child stays in servitude. Social advancement exists, yet demands exceptional situations, sacred involvement, or both. The standing of females in this civilization brings its particular intricacies. Egyptian females experience greater liberty than their equivalents in numerous early societies. They possess the ability to control assets, pursue commerce, and even govern in rare situations. Still, they stay restricted by social demands, constrained by custom, characterized by their associations with males. For a religious leader's child, these constraints grow especially severe. She must preserve ceremonial cleanliness, maintain family reputation, and ready herself for a union that will fulfill political and religious objectives. Her individual longings count less than her family's requirements, her personal belief less than her communal function. The religious terrain of Egypt during this time mirrors hundreds of years of growth. The collection of deities comprises countless divine beings, each possessing particular functions and duties. Ra controls the solar orb. Isis administers mystical arts and parenthood. Osiris evaluates the deceased. This intricate framework demands meticulous oversight, exact ceremonies, and total commitment. The religious leaders serving these deities experience years of instruction. They acquire the ability to understand the holy inscriptions, execute the morning observances, and read the indicators that disclose sacred intention. Their existences center around the sacred building timetable, their personas molded by their devotion to the deities. Learning in religious households highlights both functional abilities and spiritual understanding. Young ones acquire the ability to understand and inscribe, to perform calculations and organize, to grasp the trajectories of heavenly objects and the patterns of the natural world. They take in the accounts of the deities, the chronicle of Egypt, and the duties of their social standing. Creative works and construction during this time attain levels that will generate amazement for thousands of years. The ancient monuments already function as tributes to sacred rulership, while fresh sacred buildings and royal residences show the persistent energy of Egyptian society. These edifices represent theological ideas, converting stone into devotion, area into holy narrative. The financial framework supporting this cultural prosperity relies on the Nile's generosity. Farming supplies the basis, yet commerce extends Egyptian power throughout the early realm. Trading groups transport merchandise and concepts between Egypt and remote territories, forming connection systems that will become essential when food scarcity arrives. The governmental framework of the territory demands capable administrators who can oversee resources, gather tributes, and sustain structure throughout enormous areas. These representatives frequently originate from religious households, their learning and social associations preparing them for stations of confidence and duty. Into this settled structure arrives disruption. Prophetic visions disturb Pharaoh's slumber. Images of healthy cattle and starving cattle, of abundant grain and shriveled grain, indicate approaching shifts that will challenge the territory's steadiness. The royal interpreters and learned individuals cannot supply acceptable explanations, forming a confidence emergency. The Hebrew captive capable of reading these visions symbolizes beyond merely functional assistance. He represents an alternative method of grasping sacred transmission, a more individual association with the holy, a custom that prizes devotion instead of ceremonial precision. The choice to raise Joseph to the station of administrator astonishes the settled structure. A foreigner, a former captive, a devotee of an unfamiliar deity abruptly possesses authority surpassed only by Pharaoh's own. This selection disputes assumptions regarding sacred approval, social ranking, and the character of understanding itself. The union arrangement following this raising bears representational importance, extending well past individual contentment. By providing Joseph an Egyptian spouse, Pharaoh indicates reception of the Hebrew into the uppermost tiers of civilization. By selecting the child of Potipharah, he connects the arrival to the most holy customs of Egypt. Still, this union also forms unprecedented difficulties. How can a Hebrew believer in one God combine with an Egyptian believer in many gods? How can a previous captive blend into the religious privileged class? How can two separate comprehensions of the sacred cohabit in one residence? The responses to these inquiries will decide not merely the destiny of two persons, but what lies ahead for both nations. The combination of Joseph and Asenath transforms into a testing ground for examining whether separate customs can enhance each other or whether they must unavoidably clash. The setting is arranged for a narrative that will reverberate across generations. In the territory where the solar deity rules absolutely, a Hebrew interpreter of visions ascends to authority. In the settlement where timeless understanding maintains control, fresh disclosures ready themselves to emerge. In the residence where custom characterizes reality, evolution awaits its beginning. The residence of Potipharah. Dawn illumination passes through the open space of Potipharah's property, throwing extended darkness over smoothed limestone surfaces. The residence stands like a compact sacred building, its barriers decorated with depictions of Ra's morning passage through the firmament. In this place, within the most holy district of An, the religious leader of the solar deity raises his child in the methods of early Egypt. Asenath travels through these corridors like a youthful deity, her unshod feet making no sound on the cool stone surface. The household workers lower their heads as she moves past, their deep respect arising from both her father's station and her visible magnificence. She carries herself with the elegance of someone instructed from infancy in the ceremonies of sacred devotion, her every movement calculated and deliberate. The residence operates based on the holy timetable. At sunrise, as Ra starts his heavenly journey, the household participates in devotions that have resounded through these chambers for generations. Asenath's speaking blends with her father's in the timeless words. Her speech flawless, her grasp profound. Her learning starts prior to dawn daily. The residence writers instruct her to comprehend and inscribe in both picture writing and simplified scripts, to perform grain calculations and celestial measurements, to grasp the intricate mythology controlling Egyptian thinking. She acquires knowledge rapidly, her intellect keen as a cutting edge, her recall extensive as the Nile's waters. The religious guidance shaping her existence surpasses simple information. She takes part in the morning sacred building ceremonies, acquiring the ability to arrange tributes, to purify holy containers, to understand the indicators disclosing sacred intention. Her father observes with satisfaction as she perfects each observance, each devotion, each movement connecting earth to paradise. Still, under this organized being, inquiries awaken like wind throughout the wilderness. Asenath holds an intellect that declines to receive responses merely because they originate from power. She examines the realm with vision that perceives past the appearance, that recognizes contradictions and irregularities others disregard. The sacred building felines captivate her. They rest in the sunlight, pursue in the darkness, and accept devotion from mortals who consider them holy. Yet she observes them consume and rest and struggle, and questions how beings so common can be passages for sacred authority. The inquiry disturbs her, though she maintains it to herself. Her father recognizes her contemplation, yet reads it as intensity of commitment. Potipharah perceives in his child a coming senior priestess, a woman who will maintain the household customs with reputation and elegance. He organizes for her to obtain the best learning obtainable, summoning instructors from throughout Egypt to enhance her grasp. The residence's structure mirrors the household's position. Abundant wall hangings suspend from the barriers, showing moments from the manuscript of the deceased and the morning rebirth of Ra. Cultivation areas flourish, with water, lily blossoms, and papyrus vegetation, forming an oasis of magnificence inside the active settlement. Household workers travel through the passages with trained capability, sustaining the structure that reflects universal balance. Asenath's personal chambers fill the uppermost tier of the residence, with openings overlooking the sacred building complex toward the waterway past. From this location, she can observe the tall monuments marking holy time, the ceremonial groups honoring the deities, the everyday existence of a settlement committed to sacred devotion. The additional youthful females of her social position frequent consistently, their discussions concentrated on union possibilities and religious obligations. They examine the most recent trends in adornment and appearance enhancement, the qualities of different religious leaders' male children, the observances they will eventually supervise as spouses and parents. Yet Asenath discovers these discussions empty. She desires something richer, something addressing the inquiries keeping her conscious through the night. Why do the deities demand such complex ceremonies? Why do the religious leaders read the identical indicators in separate methods? Why does her spirit sense emptiness regardless of all the religious practice? Her physical appearance transforms into legendary across An. Youthful males from the best households request her father's authorization to pursue her, presenting generous offerings and assuring beneficial arrangements. Potipharah examines these suggestions meticulously, understanding that his child's union will influence not merely their household, but the complete religious ranking system. The everyday pattern of the residence centers around the sacred building timetable. Dawn devotions at sunrise, midday tributes when Ra attains his highest point, dusk observances as the solar deity starts his passage through the realm of darkness. Among these practices, Asenath investigates philosophy, mathematics, star study, and the holy disciplines. She demonstrates excellence in musical performance, her speaking capable of seizing the otherworldly magnificence demanded for sacred building observances. The stringed instrument responds to her contact like a living being, creating sounds that appear to transport devotions straight to paradise. Still, even in these instances of rising above, She senses a separation from the deities she attends. The royal associations her father sustains deliver information of the broader realm. She learns of food scarcities in remote territories, of conflicts and agreements, of the intricate political maneuvering maintaining Egypt steady and thriving. These accounts kindle her creative thinking, causing her to question about existence past the sacred building barriers. Written works occupy her individual collection. Ancient documents holding the understanding of eras. She examines the universal beginning legends, the narratives of the deities' exploits, the ethical instructions directing Egyptian existence. Yet she also investigates outside manuscripts, acquiring knowledge regarding the convictions and customs of alternative nations, broadening her grasp past customary limits. The celebrations marking the Egyptian timetable deliver excitement to the residents. During these commemorations, the standard pattern yields to complex observances, communal ceremonial groups, and collective celebration. Asenath takes part with suitable self-respect, yet examines everything with the vision of a natural philosopher. She recognizes how the ordinary individual's commitment varies from the religious leader's theological refinement. The cultivators bringing tributes to the sacred building honor with straightforward belief, while the learned privileged class participate in intricate theological discussions. Both methods pursue identical sacred approval, yet through extremely separate approaches. The union suggestions arriving with growing regularity form friction in the residence. Potipharah desires to organize a combination that will progress the household's station and attend the deity's objectives. Asenath honors her father's desires, yet cannot picture connecting herself to any of the youthful males pursuing her. They appear pleasant, adequate, these male children of religious leaders and representatives. They communicate with intelligence regarding religious subjects, show suitable deep respect in the sacred building, and present reasonable possibilities for an agreeable existence. Still, none of them participate in her richer inquiries. None of them dispute her reasoning or awaken her spirit. The fierce creature representation decorating the residence communicates to something untamed in her character. These formed beings, representations of sacred authority and royal power, appear to reflect her personal, uncontrolled essence. She recognizes with their power, their self-reliance, their decline to be completely tamed, even in devotion to the deities. Her father's growing worry regarding her unmarried condition transforms into a foundation of morning discussion. He shows her of her obligations, her duties, the significance of sustaining household reputation. She pays attention with respect, yet cannot compel herself to receive any of the suggested matches. The sweet substance appearing on the household surface each dawn brings pleasantness that appears to guarantee something past current situations. Asenath creates a specific preference for this golden material, discovering in its taste a suggestion of opportunities she cannot yet identify. Prophetic visions start to disturb her slumber. She perceives unusual images of radiance and obscurity, of sacred entities who carry no similarity to the recognizable Egyptian deities. These night visitors communicate in vocabularies she doesn't comprehend. Still, their communications appear to contact her spirit straight. The elevated structure, ascending from the eastern section of the residence, transforms into her preferred sanctuary. In this place, above the sound and movement of the residence, she can contemplate and worship and struggle with the inquiries progressively controlling her reasoning. The perspective from these elevations includes both the sacred building complex and the waterway, both the holy and the ordinary realms. As information comes of the Hebrew captive, who has been raised to administrator, Asenath pays attention with increasing captivation. The account appears impossible. Still, dependable origins verify its reality. A foreign captive, a devotee of an unfamiliar deity, has been provided authority surpassed only by Pharaoh's own. The consequences of this raising disturb the settled structure. If sacred approval can settle on a foreigner, what does this signify for Egyptian comprehension of the deities? If understanding can originate from outside customary origins, what does this indicate regarding the character of reality itself? These inquiries circulate through Asenath's intellect as she proceeds with her morning pattern. The recognizable ceremonies start to sense empty. The timeless devotions appear to resound in vacant area. Something is awakening in her spirit, something the ancient assurances cannot fulfill. The setting is arranged for evolution. In the residence of Potipharah, where custom governs absolutely, shift readies itself to emerge. The child of the solar deity's religious leader occupies the threshold of a fresh comprehension, though she doesn't yet understand where it will guide. Joseph's ascent to authority. The dungeon chamber in Memphis contains beyond merely another neglected captive. Joseph, male child of Jacob, occupies in obscurity that cannot reduce the radiance inside his vision. His hands, formerly delicate from his father's preference, currently carry the hardened skin of difficult work. His prophetic visions, formerly occupied with grain bundles and celestial bodies, currently concentrate on endurance and expectation. The Hebrew's standing develops gradually within the guards and captives. His capacity to read prophetic visions distinguishes him from additional captives, males who performed genuine offenses or became casualties of political scheming. Joseph's talent functions like a sacred illumination, revealing the concealed significance in the night images that disturb sleeping intellects. The senior beverage server and senior bread maker find this talent throughout their personal captivity. Their prophetic visions, occupied with representational pictures of vine plants and bread containers, discover flawless reading through Joseph's grasp. He communicates with assurance originating from sacred transmission, not mortal understanding. When the beverage server goes back to royal devotion, he bears an obligation of appreciation that rests until Pharaoh's personal prophetic visions form pressing requirement. The monarch's night, images of healthy cattle and starving cattle, of abundant grain and shriveled grain, confuse the assembly's most learned counselors. Egyptian vision reading, refined as it exists, cannot enter these specific representations. The beverage server's recall wakes at the flawless instant. He informs Pharaoh regarding the Hebrew captive whose readings demonstrated accurate in every particular. The suggestion bears importance because it originates from individual involvement, not simple gossip or expectation. The call comes like illumination from an unclouded firmament. Joseph discovers himself transported from dungeon to royal residence, from worn cloth to royal meeting, from obscurity to the middle of Egypt's authority. The evolution occurs so rapidly that inferior males might lose their stability. Yet Joseph's years of difficulty have readied him for this instant. Occupying before Pharaoh, Joseph represents a separate type of self-respect than the assembly has observed. His modesty originates from authentic association with the sacred, not from political manipulation. His understanding moves from sacred disclosure, not from mortal acquisition. His assurance settles on God's devotion, not on individual capacity. The reading he presents bears both guarantee and caution. 7 years of generosity will arrive first, succeeded by 7 years of food scarcity so intense that the beneficial years will be neglected. The repetition of Pharaoh's vision indicates assurance, the sacred determination that cannot be shifted or prevented. Yet Joseph presents beyond reading. He supplies a functional arrangement for overseeing the emergency. Throughout the generous years, Egypt must accumulate grain deliberately, constructing reserves that can maintain the kingdom through the approaching food scarcity. This demands governmental ability, mathematical exactness, and constant control. Pharaoh identifies sacred understanding when he perceives it. The Hebrew's reading sounds authentic in methods that surpass rational examination. The suggested resolution shows comprehension of both spiritual and functional realities. The mixture of prophetic perception and governmental capability forms precisely what Egypt requires. The raising following astonishes the settled structure. Joseph, the foreign captive, transforms into administrator of Egypt, surpassed only by Pharaoh's own authority. The marking ring, the golden linking, the delicate linen garments change his presence, yet his spirit stays constant. He attends the deity of his ancestors while governing the territory of Ra. The 7 years of generosity start instantly, as if the natural world itself responds to the prophetic declaration. The Nile's overflows arrive flawlessly. The crop collections surpass all anticipations, and Egypt thrives past calculation. Joseph's governmental frameworks demonstrate their value as grain occupies the accumulation buildings across the territory. The Egyptian nation observes their fresh administrator with a combination of interest and honor. His approaches vary from customary customs. His concerns mirror separate principles, yet his outcomes communicate for themselves. The territory operates more capably, the nation thrives, and what lies ahead seems protected. The religious hierarchy examines these progressions with specific attention. How does this Hebrew's deity compare to their personal deities? How does his prophetic talent associate to their customary approaches of sacred transmission? The inquiries form theological friction that will demand meticulous maneuvering. Joseph's station delivers him into association with the uppermost tiers of Egyptian civilization. He gathers with district administrators, sacred building governors, and assembly representatives. These encounters disclose the intricacy of Egyptian society, its powers and deficiencies, its ability for both understanding and foolishness. The royal residence transforms into his workplace, an intricate of structures and open spaces where political authority combines with religious power. In this place, choices influencing countless individuals are created morning by morning. Strategies shaping the territory's destiny are discussed and executed. The administrative framework Joseph receives mirrors hundreds of years of Egyptian governmental involvement. The writers, tribute gatherers, and territorial administrators comprehend their functions and duties. Joseph's assignment includes redirecting this present framework toward the unprecedented difficulty of readying for food scarcity. The mathematical operations demanded for this readiness extend the boundaries of early record-keeping approaches. What quantity of grain must be accumulated? How should it be dispersed throughout the territory? Which portion of each crop collection should be maintained? These inquiries demand both functional understanding and sacred direction. The construction undertakings arising from Joseph's organization change the Egyptian terrain. Fresh accumulation buildings ascend adjacent to present sacred buildings. Containment capabilities broaden to house the generous crop collections, and movement systems create to transport grain capably across the territory. The social consequences of Joseph's raising create ripples throughout Egyptian civilization. If a Hebrew can transform into administrator, what does this signify for customary rankings? If outside understanding can attend Egyptian objectives, what does this indicate regarding the character of sacred approval? The assembly environment Joseph joins prizes both capability and refinement. Representatives are anticipated to show not merely governmental ability, yet also cultural sophistication. Joseph's capacity to adjust to Egyptian traditions while sustaining his Hebrew persona forms a distinctive combination. The financial strategies Joseph executes advantage all tiers of civilization. Cultivators obtain reasonable values for their grain. Trading individuals discover fresh chances in the accumulation and dispersal frameworks, and laborers obtain work in the construction undertakings. The thriving seems to confirm sacred approval. The worldwide standing Egypt obtains through Joseph's oversight, draws interest from neighboring territories. Outside delegations come to investigate Egyptian approaches, to arrange trading agreements, and to request direction for their personal difficulties. Joseph's power extends past Egypt's limits. The individual price of this raising stays concealed from communal perspective. Joseph's household considers him deceased. His father grieves him as disappeared. His siblings persist their existences without awareness of his evolution. The achievement delivers isolation few can grasp. The prophetic visions initially disclosing Joseph's purpose currently discover their completion in surprising methods. The grain bundles that lowered to his bundle, the celestial bodies that respected his celestial body, acquire fresh significance in the setting of his governmental power. Sacred guidance functions through mortal chronicle in methods surpassing instant grasp. The union suggestion Pharaoh creates symbolizes beyond individual reflection. By presenting Joseph an Egyptian spouse, the monarch indicates complete reception of the Hebrew into the uppermost tiers of civilization. The selection of Asenath, child of Potipharah, connects Joseph to the most holy customs of Egypt. This combination will form difficulties neither spouse can completely foresee. How can a Hebrew believer in one God combine with an Egyptian believer in many gods? How can two separate comprehensions of the sacred cohabit in one residence? The responses will decide what lies ahead for both households and both nations. The 7 years of generosity approach their conclusion as Joseph readies for the superior challenge forward. The food scarcity approaching will confirm either his prophetic talent or eliminate his standing. The importance couldn't be more elevated for both the Hebrew administrator and the Egyptian territory. Occupying at the highest point of earthly authority, Joseph stays aware of sacred objective. His raising attends purposes surpassing individual goal. His power exists to maintain existence throughout the approaching emergency. The neglected captive has transformed into the mechanism of preservation for two kingdoms. The setting is arranged for the following section of the narrative. As generosity yields to food scarcity, as abundance changes into shortage, Joseph's most significant difficulties exist forward. The Hebrew who read prophetic visions will currently confront the challenge of executing sacred images in a realm desperately requiring both understanding and expectation. The Union Organization. The dawn solar orb throws extended darkness throughout the royal residence open space as Pharaoh reflects on the Hebrew who has attended him so devotedly. 7 years of generosity have confirmed Joseph's prophetic talent, occupied Egypt's accumulation buildings to overflowing, and formed the previous captive as the most relied upon counselor in the territory. Currently, as the natural cycles shift and the initial indicators of food scarcity start to surface on the distant horizon, Pharaoh identifies that Joseph's station demands beyond governmental power. The administrator requires richer connections in Egyptian civilization, associations that will connect him permanently to the territory he attends. A union arrangement will achieve what royal determinations alone cannot accomplish. The selection of spouse mirrors meticulous political manipulation. Asenath, child of Potipharah, symbolizes the uppermost tiers of Egyptian civilization. Her father's station as religious leader of An associates her to the most timeless and honored religious customs. Her magnificence and learning create her appropriate for the administrator's residence. Her unmarried condition forms chance for an arrangement benefiting both households. Still, Pharaoh's choice bears consequences extending well past politics. By connecting the Hebrew believer in one God to the Egyptian priestess, he forms a combination that will challenge whether separate religious customs can cohabit. The union transforms into an experiment in cultural combination, a testing ground for investigating the limits of sacred reality. The declaration of the union disperses through the assembly like rapid fire. Nobles observing Joseph's rapid ascent currently observe his complete blending into Egyptian civilization. The foreign administrator will shortly transform into household to the religious privileged class. His offspring will bear both Hebrew and Egyptian ancestry. His residence will represent the intricate realities of kingdom. Potipharah accepts the information with combined feelings. The reputation of possessing his child, selected for the administrator's spouse, surpasses his uppermost anticipations. The political benefits of such an arrangement will advantage his household for generations. Still, the religious consequences disturb him intensely. How can his child, instructed from infancy in the devotion of Ra, combine with a male who honors an unseen foreign deity? The worries plaguing Potipharah mirror broader anxieties inside Egyptian civilization. The Hebrew's achievement has previously disputed customary assumptions regarding sacred approval and earthly power. Currently, his union to a religious leader's child will form even more intricate inquiries regarding the character of religious reality and cultural persona. Asenath acquires knowledge of her union through her father's official declaration. The information comes like a thunderous strike from an unclouded firmament, changing her existence in a single instant. The woman rejecting countless suitors from Egypt's best households currently discovers herself guaranteed to a male she has never encountered, a foreigner whose very being disputes everything her upbringing instructed her to consider. The initial astonishment yields to a combination of feelings she battles to grasp. Interest conflicts with anxiety, reputation struggles with disgust, obligation disputes with longing. The Hebrew's standing for understanding and sacred approval captivates her. Yet his foreign backgrounds and unusual religious convictions form obstacles appearing impossible to surpass. The readiness for the wedding starts instantly. Garment creators come to form clothing deserving of the administrator's spouse. Ornament crafters design decorations reflecting her fresh position, and residents' household workers ready the quarters where she will exist following the observance. The movement forms a rapid change, leaving minimal time for contemplation. The initial gathering between Joseph and Asenath occurs in the official environment of Potiphar's residence. Both contributors grasp that this encounter will decide their association's destiny. They move toward each other with the caution of diplomatic delegates, each pursuing to grasp the other's personality and purposes. Joseph joins the residence with the self-respect appropriate his station. Still, his approach stays modest and honoring. He identifies the importance of this instant, not merely for his personal existence, yet for the broader objectives God is achieving through him. His spouse, to exist, symbolizes beyond individual contentment. She represents what lies ahead for the agreement nation in Egypt. Asenath examines the Hebrew administrator with vision instructed to understand personality and drive. She perceives intelligence in his demeanor, power in his posture, and something additional she cannot instantly recognize. His existence appears to occupy the chamber with an energy possessing nothing regarding political power and everything regarding sacred designation. The discussion following develops with the meticulous exactness of a diplomatic arrangement. Both contributors grasp that words communicated currently will mold their complete destiny together. They examine functional subjects of residence oversight, religious practice, and household anticipations. Yet under these apparent subjects, richer movements flow. Joseph communicates of his God with peaceful assurance, disclosing the intensity of his belief. He doesn't ridicule Egyptian convictions or require instant shift, yet his words bear conviction originating from individual involvement with sacred authority. His declaration forms both draw and opposition in Asenath's spirit. Asenath responds with the information and refinement of her religious learning. She shows recognition with Egyptian theology, grasp of religious observance, and dedication to customary principles. Still, her inquiries disclose a pursuing intellect not completely fulfilled with traditional responses. The friction between them transforms into tangible as the discussion advances. They symbolize two separate realms, two separate comprehensions of ultimate reality, two separate methods to sacred association. The political requirement of their union cannot connect these basic variations. Still, something richer than politics attracts them together. Joseph's physical presence impresses Asenath regardless of her hesitations. The years of difficulty have provided him power and endurance, while his modern raising has brought back his natural self-respect. His vision possesses intensities, communicating of suffering changed into understanding, challenges transformed into triumph. The sacred approval settling on Joseph shows itself in methods surpassing mortal clarification. His existence appears to deliver peace to disturbed spirits. His words bear importance exceeding their direct significance. His very being testifies to the reality of sacred guidance. Asenath discovers herself at once attracted to and alarmed by this supernatural aspect. The religious inquiries controlling their examination disclose the intricacy of their circumstance. Can a Hebrew believer in one God genuinely combine with an Egyptian believer in many gods? Can two separate customs of sacred honor cohabit in one residence? Can affection develop between individuals whose basic convictions regarding reality vary so drastically? Asenath's interior battle grows as the gathering advances. Her logical intellect identifies the reputation and benefit of uniting the administrator, yet her feeling and spiritual opposition develops more powerful. She has been raised to attend Egyptian deities, to respect Egyptian customs, to prize Egyptian understanding. How can she surrender everything her upbringing instructed her to consider? The draw creating between them functions on multiple tiers. Physical magnificence performs its function, yet richer powers demonstrate more influential. Joseph's spiritual power communicates to something in Asenath's spirit. Her customary religious instruction has departed unsatisfied. His assurance regarding sacred objective contrasts sharply with her developing inquiries regarding Egyptian convictions. The gathering concludes without settlement. Both contributors grasp their union will advance based on Pharaoh's intention, yet the individual inquiries stay unanswered. They separate with reciprocal honor, yet without the balance prosperous unions demand. The morning succeeding this encounter delivers sleepless nights to Potipharah's residence. Asenath withdraws to her chambers, struggling with feelings and reasoning threatening to overwhelm her meticulously structured realm. The Hebrew's existence has disturbed something deep inside her essence, waking inquiries she believed she had concealed. The wedding readiness persists regardless of the spouse's interior turmoil. Household workers proceed with their assignments with trained capability, forming the complex observance uniting the administrator to the religious household. The political importance of the occasion guarantees no expense will be conserved, no particular disregarded. Potiphera examines his child's suffering with developing worry. He identifies her opposition surpasses standard pre-wedding nervousness. The match appearing so beneficial currently threatens to form more difficulties than it resolves. Still, the organizations cannot be reversed without insulting Pharaoh and eliminating the household's standing. Joseph goes back to his obligations with his personal worries bearing intensely on his intellect. The union symbolizes beyond individual contentment. It bears consequences for God's objectives in Egypt. His spouse's spiritual state will influence not merely their residence, yet what lies ahead for the Hebrew nation in this foreign territory. The theological consequences of the combination disturb both households. How can the attendant of the unseen God combine with the child of Ra's religious leader? How can two separate comprehensions of sacred reality cohabit in one residence? The inquiries possess no simple responses, yet the union will advance without consideration. The arrangements following concentrate on functional subjects: the magnitude of the wealth exchange, the observances setting, the visitor roster, and the residence organizations all demand meticulous reflection. These examinations supply a welcome distraction from the richer spiritual matters dividing the future spouses. The Egyptian assembly observes these progressions with captivation. The Hebrew's blending into the uppermost tiers of civilization symbolizes an unprecedented occurrence. His achievement has previously disputed customary assumptions regarding sacred approval and outside understanding. Currently, his union will challenge whether cultural combination can create balance or merely form dispute. The food scarcity Joseph predicted starts to show in refined methods. The Nile's overflow comes slightly inferior than anticipated. The crop collections reveal indicators of pressure, and the accumulated grain acquires fresh significance. These progressions confirm the administrator's prophetic talent, while forming pressing need regarding the readiness existing forward. Asenath's opposition to the union develops more powerful as the observance moves near. She cannot clarify her sensations logically, yet something inside her essence refuses the combination with growing strength. The Hebrew's deity appears to require not merely reception, yet complete evolution, a value she isn't ready to provide. The prophetic visions starting to disturb her slumber-bear communications she cannot read. Unusual images of radiance and obscurity, of sacred entities and universal battles, occupy her nights with pictures possessing no location in Egyptian theology. These night visits form anxiety and disorder she participates with nobody. The closing readiness for the wedding observance start as the designated morning moves near. The royal residence readies to accommodate the most important social occasion of the year, while the sacred building of Ra readies to approve a combination challenge implicit convictions regarding the character of sacred reality. Asenath's Spiritual Shift, Part 1. The wedding observance concludes with all the ceremony appropriate a administrator's union. Yet the commemoration conceals richer movements of spiritual disruption. Asenath executes her function with elegance and self-respect. Still, her spirit stays separated. The Hebrew husband currently occupying her existence symbolizes everything her upbringing instructed her to be anxious of and refuse. The initial mornings of union develop with meticulous politeness. Joseph and Asenath maneuver their fresh association like diplomatic delegates from foreign territories, each pursuing to grasp the other's traditions and anticipations. They participate in meals and discussions, Yet the separation between their perspectives appears to broaden instead of reduce. Joseph's dawn devotions form the initial important friction. His custom of addressing the unseen God of his ancestors disturbs Asenath's grasp of suitable religious practice. She observes him communicate to vacant atmosphere, presenting appreciation and request to a deity she cannot perceive or grasp. The strength of his commitment both captivates and alarms her. The Hebrews' decline to take part in Egyptian religious observances forms functional complications. As the administrator's spouse, Asenath must sustain presentations at assembly purposes and sacred building celebrations. Joseph's lack from these occasions demands meticulous clarification and diplomatic oversight. The circumstance transforms into progressively uncomfortable for both spouses. The intellectual examinations creating between them disclose the intensity of their variations. Joseph communicates of sacred disclosure through prophetic visions and images, of calling and agreement association. Asenath responds with philosophical refinement regarding the character of sacred multiplicity and the universal structure Egyptian theology portrays. Still, under these theological discussions, individual draw develops more powerful. Joseph's personality impresses Asenath, regardless of her opposition to his convictions. His understanding in governmental subjects, his gentleness to household workers, his wholeness in managing challenging circumstances show qualities demanding honor without consideration of religious variations. The emergency arrives when Asenath tries to sustain her customary religious customs while existing in Joseph's residence. She organizes for individual observances to respect Ra and the additional deities, performing ceremonies she considers will maintain her spiritual persona. The attempt forms interior dispute growing more strong with each moving morning. The feeling pressure of existing between two realms starts to influence her physical condition. Slumber transforms into difficult to achieve. Desire reduces, and the magnificence for which she was celebrated starts to diminish. The household workers recognize these shifts, yet cannot recognize their origin. Asenath herself battles to grasp what is occurring to her. The changing moment arrives when she grasps her customary religious customs no longer supply the ease and significance they formerly presented. The recognizable devotions sense empty. The timeless ceremonies appear vacant, and the deities she has attended since youth seem remote and unresponsive. The basis of her persona starts to deteriorate. Joseph examines his spouse's suffering with developing sympathy. He identifies the indicators of spiritual battle, having encountered his personal dark nights of the spirit throughout his years of captivity and detention. His method to her emergency mirrors both understanding and endurance, preventing confrontation while sustaining his personal devotion. The discussions creating between them acquire fresh intensity and pressing need. Asenath starts to pose inquiries surpassing intellectual interest to individual requirement. How can Joseph be so assured regarding his God's being? How does he sustain belief throughout challenging situations? How can she discover the peace appearing to define his spiritual existence? Joseph's responses extract from his personal involvement of sacred devotion. He informs her regarding the prophetic visions shaping his youth, the challenges testing his belief, the instance when God's existence transformed into undeniably authentic. His declaration bears the importance of individual involvement instead of theological concept. The opposition Asenath at first sensed toward Hebrew convictions starts to diminish as she observes their results in Joseph's existence. His assurance in sacred guidance, his capacity to discover significance in suffering, his expectation for what lies ahead regardless of uncertain situations show the functional worth of his belief. The separation Asenath encounters in her spiritual battle compels her to pursue isolation. She starts to occupy extended hours in the elevated structure chamber overlooking the royal residence cultivation areas, struggling with inquiries possessing no simple responses. The recognizable environments of her youth residence no longer supply ease or protection. The abstinence she undertakes at first attends customary religious objectives, yet progressively changes into something richer. The refusal of bodily ease transforms into a method of voicing her spiritual yearning, an acknowledgement that her inner being requires sustenance Egypt's religion fails to offer. The prayers she sends forth start shifting in their essence, Rather than structured recitations aimed at particular gods, she discovers herself calling out to whatever higher force might hear her plea. The complex theology from her schooling surrenders to urgent appeals for authenticity and tranquility. The nighttime visions that have disrupted her rest since the marriage intensify dramatically. These images of radiance and shadow, of celestial creatures and universal conflicts, appear to demand some form of answer. She starts perceiving that these midnight appearances bear communications she must either embrace or refuse. The bodily manifestations of her inner turmoil grow undeniable: the loss of flesh, the absence of rest. The shifting moods disturb both Joseph and those who serve the household. Still, medical interventions accomplish nothing, since the true source exists outside the domain of worldly cures. The instant of choice draws near, like clouds before a tempest. Asenath understands she cannot persist dwelling between dual realities, honoring two separate visions of the divine. The easy middle paths she has tried to walk are tearing her apart from the inside. The selection before her holds consequences reaching well past individual contentment. To welcome Joseph's God requires abandoning all her education taught regarding the character of ultimate reality. To preserve her customary convictions requires accepting lasting separation from her spouse and his spiritual reality. The bravery needed for this choice appears to exceed her mortal strength. The change that calls to her requires not simply mental agreement, but total spiritual yielding. The known deities of her youth must be cast aside for an unseen power who imposes requirements that fill her with dread. The tower chamber transforms into her refuge as she grapples with the most significant choice of her existence. Up here, beyond the clamor and interruption of everyday existence, she must select between the safety of custom and the unknown territory of transformation. What she decides will shape not only her personal destiny, but the coming days of the family she dreams of creating with Joseph. The scene prepares itself for the decisive instant of her turning. Within the isolation of her upper room, Asenath readies herself to meet the sacred in manners that will alter her permanently. The daughter born to Ra's priest positions herself at the doorway of a fresh existence, though she cannot picture what waits past that doorway. Asenath's turning, second part. The upper chamber fills with stillness as twilight shadows stretch over the grounds of the palace. Asenath remains in isolation, her spirit burdened with the heaviness of decision. A week without food has diminished her physical form, but heightened her awareness of things beyond sight. The instant of sacred meeting draws closer, like daybreak following the deepest darkness. The emptiness gnawing her belly seems small compared to the greater emptiness of her being. She has attempted to feed her spiritual hunger with Egyptian practices, with learned conversations, with cautious balances between former and newer convictions. None have succeeded. The void inside her calls for something more extreme than she has been prepared to entertain. The quiet of the room appears to throb with waiting. Asenath kneels upon the stone surface, her palms lifted in a motion that fits no specific religious custom. She addresses the unfamiliar God of her spouse, the invisible force who has shown such might in Joseph's existence. Her appeal starts with uncertainty, with the reluctance of someone nearing an unknown throne. She confesses her lack of understanding regarding correct procedure, her strangeness with Hebrew traditions, her doubt about how to speak with a deity she cannot perceive. The language emerges gradually, every phrase selected with intention. The admission that comes next rises from places she has never explored. She owns her hollowness, her spiritual destitution, her failure to discover tranquility through customary approaches. The refined theological training that once made her proud now appears like fancy decoration upon a vacant container. The turning away from her ancestral deities becomes harder than she expected. These powers have formed her sense of self since her earliest days. They supplied framework for her grasp of existence, tied her to kinfolk and cultural customs. To forsake them feels like severing portions of her being. Still, the certainty strengthens that she must make a choice. The God belonging to Joseph requires complete devotion, not the split allegiance she has tried to sustain. The easy blending she has pursued becomes revealed as impossible. She must welcome either the ancient gods or the new one, though not the two together. The change starts quietly, with a feeling of presence that occupies the vacant room. Asenath perceives herself encircled by a truth that goes beyond bodily feeling, held by affection that surpasses mortal comprehension. The unseen God makes himself known through immediate spiritual knowing rather than reasoned debate. The radiance that slowly fills the chamber originates from no worldly source. It appears to flow from inside her very essence, as though sacred presence were waking something that has existed all along but never been acknowledged. The brilliance intensifies as her yielding grows more total. The sacred messenger who materializes in front of her possesses loveliness past all description. The being's shape appears to move between mortal and heavenly, known and completely strange. The countenance mirrors Joseph's characteristics but changed by celestial splendor. Earthly handsomeness raised to sacred flawlessness. The speech that sounds forth holds power that demands instant focus. The language arrives not in Egyptian or Hebrew, but in a tongue that goes around the ears and addresses immediately to the spirit. The communication enters her awareness with plainness that permits no uncertainty or bewilderment. The angelic declaration proclaims her change already complete. She exists no more as Asenath the Egyptian, but Asenath the Hebrew, no longer Petipharah's daughter, but daughter of the highest. The alteration functions at depths past mortal choice, sacred action that goes beyond mortal striving. The honeycomb that the angel offers materializes in palms that appear, constructed of radiance itself. The golden matter shines with interior brilliance. Every chamber flawlessly shaped, the pleasant taste apparent rather than simply experienced. The offering symbolizes sacred provision for her spiritual hunger. The call to consume holds meanings she grasps instinctively. This stands not as common nourishment but holy feeding, not bodily provision but spiritual joining. To consume means to receive not simply sacred gift but sacred character, to transform into something fresh rather than simply improved. The pause that she experiences shows the enormousness of the selection. After she samples this celestial nourishment, no going back to her previous existence will be possible. The change will prove finished and permanent, touching not simply her convictions, but her deepest being. The choice to consume emerges from places past reasonable thinking. Her palm extends toward the honeycomb with the certainty of someone who has discovered what she has continually searched for. The pleasant taste that occupies her mouth holds flavors that no earthly nourishment can offer. The bodily feelings that go with her consuming appear to validate the spiritual truth of the change. Power courses through her diminished frame. Loveliness comes back to her diminished characteristics, and calmness descends over her disturbed spirit. The sacred nourishment achieves what mortal striving could not accomplish. The directions that come after the miraculous feeding offer practical direction for her fresh existence. She must take away the Egyptian religious items from her rooms, stop taking part in pagan rituals, and match herself fully with Hebrew conviction and custom. The former existence must be forsaken completely. The assurance that goes with these directions speaks of coming favor past imagination. She will transform into mother to countless numbers. Her sons will receive sacred assurances, and her change will supply a pattern for others who desire to understand the true God. Her individual crisis fulfills intentions larger than she can comprehend. The slow disappearing of the sacred presence departs her solitary but not forsaken. The recollection of the meeting burns inside her awareness like a flame that refuses to die. She has contacted eternity and been contacted by it, known reality at its most profound level. The taking away of her Egyptian religious items transforms into an expression of reverence rather than simple compliance. Every statue, every charm, every scroll symbolizes a section of her existence that must be concluded. The destruction of these objects makes room for fresh spiritual truths to establish themselves. The washing that she performs after finishing this cleansing fulfills both practical and symbolic intentions. The liquid removes not simply bodily impurities, but the spiritual remnants of her previous existence. She comes forth from the purifying as a fresh creation, prepared to welcome her changed identity. The garments that she selects mirror her fresh spiritual position. Rather than the fancy clothing that identified her as a priest's daughter, She picks plain robes that communicate modesty and commitment. The outer alteration reflects the interior change that has occurred. The looking glass that shows her appearance displays alterations that extend past bodily looks. Her gaze holds depths that communicate of sacred meeting. Her face radiates calmness that goes beyond comprehension, and her manner proposes power that originates from spiritual rather than social origins. The darkness that comes after this miraculous day delivers the first calm rest she has known since her marriage. The visions that previously disturbed her sleep get replaced by images of promise and hope. She rests like a youngster who has discovered her route home following being lost in the wild lands. The daybreak that rouses her holds fresh significance. The sun that climbs over the palace grounds no more symbolizes the god Ra, but the making of the true God who has declared her for his possession. The radiance that fills her room appears to mirror the sacred brilliance that changed her existence. The readying for encountering Joseph mirrors her fresh grasp of their bond. She exists no more as the unwilling bride who married for political benefit, but the committed wife who holds her spouse's most profound beliefs. The walls that separated them have been taken away by sacred action. The eagerness that occupies her spirit speaks of chances that reach well past individual contentment. Her change creates openings to spiritual closeness that she never pictured possible. The marriage that started as a diplomatic arrangement will transform into a joining of beings connected in sacred intention. The wedding darkness. The change that has occurred in Asenath's spirit radiates from her countenance like dawn radiance on motionless liquid. She comes forth from her room of turning with elegance that communicates of sacred meeting, her manner showing the calmness that arrives from spiritual settlement. The woman who withdrew in spiritual difficulty returns as a fresh creation. Joseph watches the alteration in his wife with amazement and increasing awareness. The quiet indicators of sacred working feel known to him from his personal knowledge of God's changing might. Her gaze holds depths that were absent previously. Her face radiates peace that goes beyond mortal reasoning. The discussion that develops between them holds importance that reaches well past common marital exchange. Asenath speaks of her meeting with the sacred messenger, her turning away from Egyptian gods, her welcoming of Hebrew conviction. Every word validates what Joseph's spirit already understands. His wife has been declared by the identical God who summoned him from prison to palace. The shared awareness that moves between them builds closeness that neither had known before. They exist no more as strangers bound by political requirement, but companions connected in sacred intention. The spiritual matching that has avoided them since their marriage ritual becomes truth through supernatural action. The bodily draw that was continually present between them now discovers expression in a setting of total spiritual accord. Loveliness assumes fresh significance when improved by sacred radiance. Longing transforms into holy when connected to spiritual unity, and affection discovers its most genuine expression in the connecting of beings devoted to the identical eternal intentions. The room that has observed her change transforms into the location for their genuine wedding darkness. Here, where sacred radiance broke through mortal shadow, where angelic presence changed earthly truth, spouse and wife uncover the closeness that God planned for marriage from the start. The gentleness that marks their joining mirrors both mortal fondness and sacred favor. Joseph comes near his wife with the respect owed to someone who has known sacred appearance, while Asenath answers with the confidence of someone who has discovered calmness through yielding to sacred purpose. The language they communicate to each other holds prophetic importance that neither completely grasps. Joseph speaks of the coming days that God has arranged for their family, while Asenath answers with conviction that goes beyond her restricted comprehension. Their discussion transforms into a manner of reverence, their assurances to each other extensions of their devotion to sacred intentions. The bodily completion of their marriage occurs in an environment of holy celebration. The desire that pulls them together has been cleansed by sacred fire, changed from simple biological draw into an expression of spiritual unity. Their joining in love transforms into a manner of appeal, their connection a showing of sacred affection. The calmness that descends over them following holds suggestions of forever. They rest in one another's arms with the satisfaction of those who have discovered their correct position in sacred arrangement. The difficulties that identified their early marriage appear like faraway recollections replaced by a chord that only God can make. The visions that come to their rest, the darkness, speak of coming favor past imagination. They perceive images of sons who will hold sacred assurances of family groups that will come forth from their connection of power, that will reach well past their personal lifetimes. Their individual contentment fulfills intentions that go beyond personal achievement. The dawn that comes after delivers fresh grasp of their positions in God's design. Joseph's rise to administrator of Egypt makes chances for sacred intentions to develop through political might. Asenath's change from Egyptian priestess to Hebrew matriarch allows the connecting of peoples through spiritual unity. The household that wakes to this fresh truth must accommodate to alterations that extend past the clear. The servants watch the change in their mistress with interest and regard, understanding that something important has taken place, even when they cannot completely grasp its character. The religious customs that will now mark their home make both chances and difficulties. Joseph's dawn appeals can now contain his wife's taking part, while Asenath's spiritual hunger discovers fulfillment in Hebrew reverence. The unity they reach in spiritual concerns supplies a base for every other part of their bond. The political meanings of Asenath's turning stay concealed from public sight, but their importance will develop across time. The daughter of Potiphar's devotion to the Hebrew God makes links between Joseph's rule and Egyptian community that will become essential during the approaching scarcity. The affection that has grown between them functions on various levels at once: bodily draw, emotional matching, mental stimulation, and spiritual unity joined to make a bond that mirrors sacred plan for marriage. Their connection transforms into a pattern for others who desire to connect different cultures and customs. The difficulties that wait ahead will examine the power of their tie, but the base created through sacred action supplies safety that mortal striving alone could never reach. They meet the coming days with assurance that arrives from understanding their marriage fulfills intentions greater than individual contentment. The palace that shelters their changed bond transforms into a location where sky and earth encounter. The presence of two individuals connected in sacred intention makes an environment that touches everyone who comes into their realm. Their dwelling transforms into a place of safety where God's purpose can be achieved through mortal cooperation. The court that watches their marriage perceives proof of sacred favor in the accord that marks their bond. The connection that started as a political arrangement has transformed into an affection account that bears witness to the might of sacred mercy to change mortal spirits. The coming days that extend in front of them hold assurances and trials in matching measure. The scarcity that Joseph foretold will examine their conviction and their affection, while the sons that will be delivered to them will move forward the sacred intentions that united them. The inheritance that their connection will make reaches well past their personal lifetimes. The family groups that will come forth from their offspring will hold the recollection of their affection account through many generations, bearing witness to the might of sacred mercy to connect spirits, span cultures, and achieve eternal intentions through mortal bonds. The wedding darkness that finishes their path from arranged marriage to spiritual connection symbolizes more than individual achievement. It identifies the start of a fresh section in the account of God's community, a section that will be composed through the affection of two spirits connected in sacred intention, existence at court. The palace rouses every dawn to the sound of Joseph's appeals. Hebrew language of appreciation that sound through passages created for Egyptian rituals. Asenath's speech connects his now, their blended reverence, making a place of safety of sacred presence inside the location of earthly might. The change of the administrator's household creates ripples through the whole court framework. The everyday pattern that controls their existences mirrors the special position they hold in Egyptian community. Joseph's ruling tasks demand his attendance in the throne chamber, the treasury, and the grain-holding places that must aid the kingdom. Asenath's duties as the administrator's wife pull her into court rituals, diplomatic gatherings, and the complex social systems that tie the ruling class together. The scarcity that Joseph predicted starts to show itself in quiet manners that only the skilled gaze can notice. The Nile's flood comes somewhat lower than anticipated. The harvest results display slight reductions, and the held grain assumes fresh importance. The 7 cycles of plenty surrender to the lean cycles that will examine every part of Joseph's readiness. The ruling difficulties that come from controlling Egypt's answer to the difficulty display Joseph's sacred understanding. Distribution frameworks must be improved, rationing procedures created, and diplomatic bonds sustained with surrounding kingdoms that meet similar deficiencies. The Hebrew administrator's name for understanding extends throughout the ancient realm. Asenath's position in court activities demands careful movement of religious and cultural delicacies. Her turning to Hebrew conviction stays a private concern, but her altered priorities make quiet tensions in social circumstances. She must be present at temple rituals without taking part in the reverence, sustain friendships with priestesses while turning away their convictions. The coming child that soon favors their marriage makes joy that reaches past individual contentment. The information of the administrator's successor extends through the palace like dawn radiance, delivering promise for coming days and confirmation of sacred favor on their connection. The court that previously regarded their marriage with doubt now perceives proof of sacred benefit. The delivery of Manasseh identifies a fresh section in their family account. Joseph's selection of name mirrors his appreciation for God's faithfulness in assisting him to set aside the suffering of his history. The Hebrew name offered to the son of an Egyptian mother represents the cultural blending that their marriage shows. The courtly training that Asenath guarantees for her son mirrors her personal change of grasp. She instructs him both Hebrew and Egyptian languages, both biblical and classical writings, both single God and historical religious ideas. The child's training transforms into a span between 2 realms. The political movements of the court make both chances and difficulties for the Hebrew administrator's family. Some nobles regard Joseph's achievement with respect and desire to connect themselves with his growing power. Others hold bitterness about the outsider's rise and search for manners to weaken his power. The economic approaches that Joseph puts in place during the scarcity show both practical understanding and sacred direction. The held grain gets distributed following carefully figured proportions, guaranteeing that Egypt's community survives while sustaining reserves for the worst cycles ahead. The kingdom's success during difficulty amazes surrounding peoples. The international groups that come requesting relief from the scarcity supply chances for Joseph to show both ruling skill and Hebrew faithfulness. Representatives from kingdoms throughout the ancient realm observe the success that sacred understanding has delivered to Egypt. The delivery of Ephraim adds to the family's happiness, while increasing its importance in sacred history. Joseph's selection of name mirrors his appreciation for God's faithfulness in making him productive in the territory of his suffering. The second son finishes the base of what will transform into 2 of Israel's most significant family groups. The home contentment that marks their household makes a sharp difference to the hardship that the scarcity delivers to other families. Joseph and Asenath's affection keeps deepening as they hold the difficulties of raising youngsters and controlling their complex duties inside the Egyptian court. The religious teaching that they supply for their sons mirrors the special blending of cultures that their marriage shows. The boys gain knowledge of Hebrew scriptures and Egyptian writings, Jewish traditions and courtly manners, single God conviction and ruling abilities. Their training readies them for positions that go beyond cultural limits. The social position that Asenath sustains as the administrator's wife demands constant focus to procedure and custom. She must respect Egyptian traditions while sustaining Hebrew beliefs, support her spouse's approaches while creating her personal systems of power, and ready for a coming time that stays uncertain despite sacred assurances. The palace scheming that moves around Joseph's position grows stronger as the scarcity increases. Some court members understand that difficulty makes chances for progress, while others worry that the Hebrew's power threatens customary Egyptian principles. The political pressures make underlying currents that touch every part of court existence. The understanding that Joseph shows in controlling both ruling and individual difficulties creates him as necessary to Egypt's survival. His capacity to sustain Hebrew conviction while fulfilling Egyptian concerns shows the chance of cultural blending without giving up core beliefs. The affection account that keeps developing between Joseph and Asenath supplies steadiness amid the disorder of difficulty control. Their shared support, held conviction, and increasing family make a base of power that allows them to meet whatever difficulties wait ahead. The success that Egypt sustains during the early cycles of scarcity confirms Joseph's prophetic gift and ruling ability. The kingdom that readied for difficulty under sacred direction knows plenty, while surrounding peoples meet starvation. The Hebrew administrator's name for understanding extends throughout the ancient realm. The youngsters who develop in the palace observe directly the joining of Hebrew conviction with Egyptian culture. Manasseh and Ephraim gain knowledge to move both realms with ease, their ease in different locations, readying them for positions that will span different communities and customs. The inheritance that Joseph and Asenath make through their faithful fulfillment reaches well past their personal lifetimes. Their pattern of achieving cultural blending, their display of conviction under strain, and their showing of sacred favor on mixed marriages will motivate many generations of believers who meet similar difficulties. The court that watches their marriage perceives practical proof of sacred favor on those who respect God's intentions. The Hebrew administrator's household transforms into a witness to the might of conviction to change bonds, span cultures, and achieve eternal intentions through mortal cooperation. The coming time that extends in front of them holds both assurance and danger. The staying cycles of scarcity will examine their conviction and their affection, while the sacred intentions that united them will keep developing through their offspring. Their existence at court fulfills as readiness for positions in sacred history that neither completely grasps. The murder scheme first part. The palace passages murmur with secrets that become more threatening as the scarcity increases. Among the court members who previously regarded Joseph's rise with simple interest, darker feelings now establish themselves. The Hebrew administrator's achievement during difficulty has made both respect and bitterness, both appreciative companions and harsh opponents. The son of Pharaoh travels through these passages with the assurance of someone delivered to might. Still, his position holds weights that create disappointment. The crown heir who anticipated to receive unchallenged power now discovers himself overshadowed by a foreign ruler whose understanding surpasses his personal. The longing that starts in the heir's spirit when he watches Asenath extends past simple draw. Her loveliness improved by sacred radiance holds him fully. Her elegance refined by spiritual change makes other women appear rough by comparison. Her position as the administrator's wife makes her both prohibited and impossible to resist. The watching that the heir performs during court activities shows the depth of his increasing fixation. He observes Asenath's exchanges with other court members, examines her faces during rituals, and commits to memory her language during public discussions. His focus becomes so concentrated that others start to observe his preoccupation. The reasoning that grows in his thinking changes longing into believed right. As Pharaoh's son, he tells himself he merits the finest woman in the kingdom. As coming ruler, he declares power over all his subjects' belongings. As an Egyptian, he questions whether a Hebrew merits such a prize. The moral decay that starts to shape his thinking spreads like poison through his grasp of fairness and right conduct. The heir who previously regarded Joseph's understanding now perceives only barriers to his longings. The ruler who preserved Egypt during difficulty transforms into an opponent to be removed. The companions that the heir searches for his dark intention exist among the court members who shelter their personal complaints against Joseph's rule. Some hold bitterness about the Hebrew's foreign sources, others feel jealousy about his quick progress, and still others worry that his power threatens customary Egyptian principles. The general who directs the palace protection supplies the military knowledge that the scheme demands. His devotion to the crown heir exceeds his regard for the administrator. His drive surpasses his moral sense, and his abilities make him a powerful companion in any secret plan. The gatherings that occur in shadowed rooms of the palace create approaches that become more complex and threatening. The plotters grasp that taking away Joseph demands careful arrangement flawless timing, and complete secrecy. Finding out would signify not simply failure, but ruin for everyone participating. The mental profile that comes forth from these arranging meetings shows men pushed by different reasons. The heir acts from desire and sense of deserving, the general from drive and taking advantage, the court members from bitterness and worry. Their separate reasons for standing against Joseph make both power and weakness in their partnership. The schedule that the plotters create mirrors their grasp of palace pattern and safety arrangements. They locate chances when Joseph journeys outside the capital, instants when his protection group gets reduced, and circumstances where his ending could seem unplanned. The approaches that they think about range from straight attack to quiet poison, from arranged mishaps to open uprising. Every method holds benefits and dangers that must be measured against their final aims. The choice they arrive at mirrors both their skills and their desperation. The information collecting that supports their arranging demands careful watching of Joseph's everyday pattern. The plotters observe his gathering schedules, his journey designs, his safety arrangements, and his individual practices. The facts they gather supply the base for their attack approach. The moral lowering that goes with their arranging touches every plotter in different manners. The heir's feeling of deserving becomes more powerful with every gathering, while the general's tactical thinking turns increasingly harsh. The court members discover themselves pulled deeper into moral decay than they first planned. The secrecy that encircles their doings makes an environment of pressure and suspicious fear. Every plotter worries about finding out, doubts, betrayal, and questions the devotion of his companions. The ties that connect them become shown as delicate when examined by the strain of sustaining their false appearance. The sacred protection that encircles Joseph and his family functions through both supernatural and natural approaches. Visions warn of threat, situations make delays, and mortal agents supply unexpected facts. The hand of God works to keep safe those who fulfill his intentions. The devoted servants who stay faithful to Joseph's household start to observe quiet alterations in palace environment. Discussions cease when they come into chambers. Certain court members prevent eye-meeting, and the normal designs of court existence display indicators of interruption. The spiritual conflict that occurs beneath the surface of palace politics mirrors the universal struggle between good and evil. The powers that stand against God's intentions work through mortal agents to ruin those who fulfill sacred purpose. The importance reaches well past individual drive to eternal weight. The snare that the plotters ready demands Asenath's taking part, though she stays unaware of their plans. They arrange to employ her confidence, her kindness, and her social duties to position her in a place where she can be seized without creating instant warning. The timing that they select matches with a time when Joseph's ruling tasks demand extended absence from the capital. The scarcity's requirements make chances for the plotters to act without instant finding out of their scheme. The weapons that they collect for their attack mirror their resolve to achieve at any price. The force they arrange surpasses what simple taking away of Joseph would demand, proposing that their moral decay has moved past reasonable thinking. The final readying that identify the coming near of their arranged attack make pressure that touches the whole court. The plotters struggle to sustain normal looks while readying for actions that will change their existences permanently. The warnings that arrive to Joseph through different sources make awareness of threat without showing its particular character. The sacred protection that encircles him supplies sufficient facts to increase watchfulness without exposing the complete range of the danger. The scene prepares itself for meeting that will examine the power of sacred protection against mortal evil. The scheme that threatens Joseph's existence and Asenath's virtue symbolizes more than individual threat. It contains the eternal struggle between those who fulfill God's intentions and those who stand against them. The day draws near when the plotters will act, when their months of arranging will either achieve or fail, when the sacred protection that encircles Joseph's household will meet its greatest examination. The result will shape not simply the destiny of individuals, but the coming days of God's intentions in Egypt. The quiet that comes before the tempest makes an environment of waiting that touches everyone in the palace. Those who fulfill evil intentions ready for victory, while those who fulfill sacred purpose trust in protection that goes beyond mortal grasp. The daybreak that will deliver the difficulty climbs over a palace separated between those who scheme ruin and those who trust in sacred preservation. The approaching day will show whether mortal evil or sacred intention becomes shown as more powerful in the eternal struggle for authenticity and fairness. The murder scheme's second part. Darkness settled thick over Egypt. The moon drifted faint and slim, its radiance scarcely touching the palace structures. In the upper rooms, Asenath positioned herself by a small opening. The air remained motionless. Somewhere underneath, a torch sputtered. Somewhere distant past, the Nile murmured against its edges. She had received a summons, a communication delivered to her in the late hours, summoning her to the gardens. Pharaoh's son desired to communicate. He declared it was pressing. Her spirit had constricted at the language, but obligation pulled at her steps. She informed herself. Joseph's position made them both objects of murmurs and appeals. She had endured worse situations. She would meet this as well. Covering herself in a dark cloak, Asenath travelled through the silent passages. Statues of the deities observed as she went by. Her sandals created the slightest sound on the cool stone surface. She experienced the heaviness of her necklace, the lion decoration Joseph had offered her, resting near her spirit. Beyond, the gardens reached in silver and shadow. Papyrus stirred gently, moved by a wind that appeared to climb only when she stepped among them. Asenath halted. The location experienced too motionless. No servants remained. No protection positioned near, only the moon and the silence of leaves. A shape stepped forth from the columns. Pharaoh's son. His countenance remained even, his expression keen. He bowed low, though his gaze moved behind her. Asenath experienced a tingle down her spine. She rotated and perceived movement, shapes sliding from the darkness, males cloaked in shadow, her breath seized. This stood as no discussion. This stood as no appeal. For a pulse beat, Asenath froze. Her thinking raced. She possessed no weapon, no companion, no way out, though something deep inside, a speech older than worry, climbed to the surface. Flee! The darkness exploded open. She rotated, the cloak sliding from her shoulders, sandals striking against the path, spirit striking against her ribs. Behind, shouts tore through the stillness. Palms grabbed, stones dispersed. She darted between structures of stone and hedge, steps skimming over the earth, in the maze of the gardens. Moonlight wove bright threads between shadows. Asenath fled blind. Still, the route appeared to unfold in front of her. A rotation to the right, a slim passage, a low arch she bent beneath, just in time. Behind, the sounds moved, curses, the keen scrape of sandals slipping, the stumble of those too certain they would seize her. Her air passages burned, her throat ached for breath, though she fled onward. And then, just as her power started to unravel, a radiance climbed in front of her, gentle, golden, and unusual. It arrived not from torches, nor from the moon, but from the air itself. Asenath stumbled, her steps slowing, her gaze wide. In the clearing positioned a shape, cloaked in radiance, not cloth, the form of a male, still not of this realm. His countenance remained a shine she could not gaze upon, his palms lifted in a silent direction. The chasers ceased. Not one ventured to cross the line of brilliance drawn over the earth. Asenath descended to her knees. A great silence descended over the darkness. She could hear her personal breath, the wild striking of her spirit. She could hear the wind sighing through the papyrus. The shape travelled and the air trembled with calmness. In that instant, power coursed back into her, though it stood not as the power of flesh. It stood as the silent, constant bravery of the being, the understanding that she remained perceived, that she remained not solitary. The males in the darkness dropped back as though pushed by a palm unseen. Pharaoh's son positioned frozen, his countenance faint, his arrangement undone. And then, as gently as it had arrived, the radiance disappeared. The shape had gone. The darkness folded once more around her, though Asenath remained no more fleeing. She climbed, lifting her chin, her breath slowing, her spirit settling. She rotated, moving past the males who had remained to perceive her undone. No one extended for her now. No one encountered her gaze. They divided, stepping aside as though the radiance had identified her with something they could no more contact. Back inside the palace, Asenath crossed the silent passages. The lion decoration contacted her skin, warm as though it had consumed the sun. She moved not as a woman saved by chance. There was one changed, not by way out alone, though by the silent might that had encountered her in the darkness. In the days that came after, the murmurs disappeared. Pharaoh's son became careful. Joseph stated little, though his gaze held an understanding glance when they encountered hers. She communicated to no one of the shape in the garden. Some things existed past language. Still, something had moved. Asenath held it in her movement, in the manner she positioned herself, in the manner she listened. She had met the shadow, not with blade or shield, though with confidence. And in that confidence, she had been offered back to herself. At darkness, when the torches diminished, and the silence of the Nile occupied the chambers, Asenath would position herself by the opening. She observed the river bend under the moon, observed the stars drift like lanterns over the darkness, and in her silent spirit she held a flame no palm could take. The garden remained, though no one summoned her there once more. The darkness remained, though its worry had lost its grasp. And Asenath, the foreign bride, the one who turned, the lioness, travelled through the palace with an elegance that arrived not from her position, though from the darkness she had been examined and had not descended. The murder scheme, second part. The snare releases with silent exactness. Asenath discovers herself pulled into the palace gardens by a communication declaring urgent requirement. The moon suspends low over Memphis, throwing long shadows between the date palms. She travels through the courtyards with cautious steps, her sandals murmuring against the stone surface. Pharaoh's son remains in the darkness. His companions come forth from behind pillars and archways, their countenances concealed beneath linen coverings. The air becomes thick with threat. Asenath's breath seizes as she understands the false appearance. These males hold bronze blades that shine in the moonlight. The heir steps forward, his speech gentle though filled with danger. He communicates of his longing, his arrangements to declare her after Joseph rests cold in the desert. His language paints an image of might and holding. Asenath positions frozen, her thinking racing through chances of way out. The first attack arrives quick and silent. A blade arcs through the air toward her shoulder. At that instant, something remarkable occurs. The darkness around her starts to move and alter. A presence occupies the garden, unseen, still undeniable. The attacker's blade rotates aside as though turned away by an unseen palm. Asenath travels with sudden elegance, her steps discovering routes between her attackers. The sacred protection that encircles her transforms into a shield of radiance. The males stumble and descend, their weapons clattering uselessly to the ground surface. Their assurance breaks as they observe might past their grasp. She flees through the palace passages, her spirits striking like temple drums. Behind her, the plotters struggle to understand what they have observed. Some escape into the darkness, forsaking their heir and his failing scheme. Others, position fixed, staring at the space where Asenath vanished. The chase directs through concealed passages and forgotten rooms. Asenath's understanding of the palace fulfills her well. She understands every secret door, every slim stair that directs to safety. The goddess-like power that courses through her limbs holds her past the reach of mortal threat. Daybreak splits over the Nile as she arrives to Joseph's rooms. Her spouse perceives the fear in her gaze, the torn fabric of her robes. His countenance darkens with grasp. The political activity has rotated deadly. The foreign administrator and his Egyptian wife have transformed into objects of a scheme that extends to the highest levels of might. Joseph's answer arrives quick and firm. He summons his most trusted protectors, males who have fulfilled him faithfully since his climb to might. Communications fly over the city like birds of prey. The pharaoh himself must gain knowledge of his son's betrayal. The delicate balance of the kingdom suspends in the balance. The following time delivers alterations that create ripples through the court. Pharaoh's son discovers himself stripped of special treatment and might. His plotters meet exile or worse. The old king's countenance displays the heaviness of a father's disappointment. Confidence once split becomes shown as hard to rebuild. Asenath comes forth from the trial, changed once more. The frightened woman who fled through dark passages has transformed into something fresh. She holds inside her the certainty of sacred protection. The gods of Egypt could not preserve her, though the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob became shown as mighty indeed. Her marriage to Joseph increases through held threat. They have met the final examination of devotion and survived. The tie between them becomes more powerful than political arrangement. Affection examined by fire comes forth cleansed and unable to break. The community of Egypt murmur of miracles in the palace gardens. Some state the gods themselves moved among the date palms that darkness. Others communicate of foreign magic and Hebrew spells. The authenticity stays concealed in the spirits of those who observed the sacred action. Asenath's name extends past the palace structures. She transforms into known as a woman contacted by the sacred, protected by powers past mortal grasp. Her account motivates other women who discover themselves seized between cultures and devotions. The murder scheme identifies a rotating point in her path. No more does she question her position in the Hebrew conviction. The God who preserved her from bronze blades has declared her as his possession. Her turning started in tears, and honey discovers completion in the crucible of mortal threat. Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. The rooms of Asenath occupy with fresh sounds. Infant cries sound through the palace passages, delivering joy following seasons of political pressure. 2 sons come inside the span of 3 cycles, every one holding the assurance of coming greatness. Their names mirror Joseph's path from bondage to might. Manasseh, the firstborn, receives his name with deep significance. God has caused me to set aside all my hardship, Joseph declares as he holds the youngster. The baby's dark gaze mirrors his mother's Egyptian heritage. Still, his characteristics hold the strong jaw of his Hebrew father. In his small form, 2 peoples discover their encountering location. Ephraim comes after, his delivery delivering even greater celebration. God has caused me to be productive in the territory of my suffering, Joseph murmurs over the second son. This youngster appears to shine with interior radiance, his movements quick and intentional, even in infancy. The servants communicate in silent tones of his unusual loveliness. Asenath observes her sons with amazement and worry. They symbolize something without precedent in the ancient realm. Half Hebrew, half Egyptian, they fit fully to neither culture, still receive the finest of both. Their coming days rest covered in mystery and chance. The boys develop under their mother's cautious direction. She instructs them the mysteries of Egyptian understanding while Joseph holds the accounts of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They gain knowledge of hieroglyphs and Hebrew letters with matching ability. Their thinking absorbs understanding like desert sand consumes rain. Palace existence forms their early cycles. They engage in play in gardens where their mother previously escaped from attackers. They gain knowledge to read the stars from Egyptian star watchers, while committing to memory the assurances offered to their Hebrew ancestors. Their training blends holy and worldly, east and west. Manasseh displays early indicators of directing. He directs focus in any chamber, his speech holding power even in childhood. The Egyptian nobles perceive in him a coming companion, someone who grasps their manners. Still his spirit strikes with Hebrew rhythm stirred by accounts of the assured territory. Ephraim shows separate gifts. His awareness to spiritual concerns amazes both parents. He communicates of visions and images that appear to arrive from sacred origins. The priests of On observe him cautiously, understanding something known still foreign in his spiritual awareness. The brothers' bond grows with natural complexity. Manasseh, as the elder, anticipates difference and regard. Ephraim, favored with unusual insight, frequently perceives past his brother's instant concerns. Their disagreements mirror the larger pressures between their dual heritage. Asenath directs them through the maze of palace politics. She instructs them when to communicate and when to stay silent. Her personal knowledge of moving between cultures becomes shown as invaluable. The boys gain knowledge to read countenances, to grasp the quiet languages of might and power. Joseph's affection for his sons understands no limits. He perceives in them the achievement of God's assurance to cause him productive. Still, he also understands the difficulties they will meet. Their mixed heritage may become shown as both favor and weight in the cycles to arrive. The Egyptian court observes the boys with interest and worry. Some perceive them as spans between Hebrew and Egyptian might. Others regard them as dangers to customary arrangement. Their very existence questions long-held assumptions about bloodline and fitting. Religious teaching transforms into an everyday priority. Asenath holds her witness of turning, the account of honey and angels that altered her spirit. The boys listen with wide gaze, grasping that their mother's path mirrors their personal complex identity. The servants murmur predictions about the brothers' coming time. Some state Manasseh will direct Egypt alongside his father. Others hold conviction Ephraim possesses gifts that will reshape the spiritual landscape. The palace hums with guessing and promise. As the boys come near their 5th and 7th cycles, their personalities transform into distinct. Manasseh leans toward ruling tasks, moving after Joseph through the grain storage and tax offices. Ephraim discovers himself pulled to the temple courts, asking questions that perplex the priests. Their mother's power stays paramount. She places in them regard for both cultures while sustaining devotion to the Hebrew God. The delicate balance she sustains fulfills as a pattern for their personal coming selections. The inheritance of Asenath and Joseph starts to assume form through their sons. These boys hold inside their veins the promises of two communities. Their account has only started. Still, already the threads of destiny start to create themselves into the larger tapestry of Israel's coming time. Asenath's position in Israelite identity. The question sounds through centuries of theological debate. How does an Egyptian woman transform into the mother of two Israelite family groups? Her account questions customary notions of bloodline and fitting. The answer rests not in family lines, but in the mysterious workings of sacred providence. Asenath's position in Israelite identity starts with her marriage to Joseph. The connection makes more than individual contentment. It creates a link between Egypt and Israel that will continue for many generations. Her welcoming into the Hebrew conviction changes her from foreign woman to covenant mother. The change extends deeper than simple turning. Through her spiritual path, Asenath contains the principle that conviction goes beyond ethnic limits. Her account transforms into a witness to the including character of God's assurances. Bloodline concerns less than heartline in the sacred economy. Her sons symbolize the achievement of this principle. Manasseh and Ephraim receive matching standing with their uncles, the sons of Jacob. They receive not simply favor, but family group identity. Their mother's foreign delivery transforms into unrelated to their covenant position. The adoption ritual identifies a pivotal instant. Jacob, now Israel, positions his palms on his grandsons' heads. The old patriarch's language holds prophetic heaviness. The angel who has delivered me from all harm, may he favor these boys, he declares. In that instant, Asenath's sons transform into Israel's sons. The favor that comes after shows sacred priorities. Jacob crosses his palms, positioning his right palm on Ephraim's head. Despite Manasseh's birthright, the younger brother receives the greater favor. This turning around of natural arrangement mirrors God's frequent selection of the unexpected. Asenath observes the ritual with profound emotion. Her boys, delivered in Egyptian palaces, receive the favor of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The assurance created to their great-grandfather now courses through them to coming generations. Her marriage to Joseph has transformed into a channel of sacred intention. The theological meanings create ripples through Scripture. Asenath's account creates precedent for foreign women coming into the covenant community. Ruth the Moabite and Rahab the Canaanite move paths she assisted making. Her pattern shows that conviction, not delivery, shapes covenant membership. The family group receiving of Ephraim and Manasseh further validates this principle. They receive portions of the assured territory matching to any other family group. Their mother's roots in Egypt create no barrier to their destiny within Israel. Where someone is born gives way to where their faith takes them. Her influence reaches past simply being a mother, extending into mentorship as well. The transformation of Asenath from a princess raised in pagan traditions to a mother within the covenant creates a pattern others can follow. Her account demonstrates how complete transformation stays within reach, no matter what someone's background looks like, or what religious path they previously walked. The writings found outside the main biblical texts make this theme even stronger. The document, known as Joseph and Asenath, portrays her religious turn as an example for every nation to witness. Her spiritual path becomes a symbol, representing humanity's shift from darkness into light. This Egyptian royal daughter stands for any person searching for divine truth. Rabbinical thinking brings in additional layers of understanding. Some traditional teachings claim Asenath was actually Dinah's daughter, which would make her Hebrew by blood, though secretly. This explanation tries to keep ethnic lines pure while still recognizing how important her role was. However, the more straightforward answer, that divine grace moves beyond human categories, carries deeper meaning. Christianity's tradition welcomes Asenath's account with genuine excitement. The early fathers of the Church saw her conversion as a preview of how Gentiles would be included in God's realm. The marriage she shares with Joseph symbolizes the union between Christ and the Church. The sons she bears represent what comes from that holy partnership. Contemporary academic study sees just how groundbreaking her story truly is. In an era fixated on ancestry and keeping ethnic lines unmixed, Asenath embodies sweeping inclusion. Her integration into Israel's family structure confronts the assumptions of that time regarding identity and where people belong. Feminist analysis brings in still another perspective. The active role Asenath takes in her own conversion stands out within ancient writings. She selects her spiritual direction rather than having someone force it on her. Her change happens through direct, personal contact with the divine, not because some male authority figure told her to change. What she leaves behind lives on through the tribal inheritances of her sons. The tribes that come from Ephraim and Manasseh grow into some of the most influential in all of Israel's recorded past. The foreign nature of their mother's birth turns into a benefit instead of a handicap. Diversity makes the covenant community richer rather than putting it at risk. Later on, the northern kingdom of Israel centers itself around Ephraim's land. The blessing given to the younger son becomes political fact. Asenath's impact stretches across multiple generations, directing the course of an entire people. Her account proves how God's intentions frequently work themselves out through surprising pathways. Asenath within rabbinical thought and Christian interpretation. The rabbis of ancient times found Asenath's story difficult to reconcile. Her birth outside of Israel troubled those scholars who were dedicated to preserving Israel's ethnic purity. The creative ways they resolve this reveal both advanced theological thinking and deep cultural worry. The pull between welcoming outsiders and keeping them out shapes how they understood her. One teaching makes Asenath into Dinah's daughter, Jacob's only daughter whose name we know. In this version, Dinah's violation by Shechem led to pregnancy. The baby gets sent to Egypt for safety and grows up as the adopted child of Potipharah. This explanation keeps the Hebrew bloodline intact while accounting for why Asenath ended up in Egypt. Building this story requires detailed construction. According to this version, Dinah gives birth without anyone knowing, then places her daughter under divine care. An angel transports the baby to Egypt, where Potipharah discovers and raises her. The tale changes Asenath from someone who converted from foreign ways into someone who was Hebrew all along, just hidden, which solves the theological puzzle the rabbis faced. Different rabbinical sources approach this differently. Some highlight how God knows everything ahead of time, proposing that God planned Asenath's conversion before it happened. Her Egyptian birth serves what God intended, getting her ready for the vital part she would play in Israel's future. This way of seeing things fits her story into the larger picture of divine planning. the mystical tradition piles on more meaning. Texts from the Kabbalah describe Asenath as a sacred soul stuck in surroundings filled with idol worship. Her conversion means freeing divine sparks from being trapped in the material world. This reading turns her personal journey into something with cosmic significance. Jewish scholars from medieval times kept the discussion going. Some acknowledge her foreign birth while stressing how genuine her conversion was. Others hold on to the Dinah connection, not willing to budge on ethnic purity. The back and forth shows ongoing struggles between focusing on one particular group versus opening up to everyone, right there in Jewish thinking. The Christian tradition looks at Asenath with different questions in mind. The early church fathers saw in her account a glimpse of what would happen when Gentiles converted. Her movement from worshipping many gods to embracing faith mirrors what the church does when it reaches out to all peoples. Her marriage to Joseph represents how Christ joins with his bride, which is the church. Literature from the church fathers emphasizes the spiritual change she undergoes. These writers talk about her conversion using language that sounds like Christian baptism. The angel's appearance parallels how the Holy Spirit works in Christian conversion experiences. Her fresh identity reflects the new creation that faith makes available. The text outside the canon called Joseph and Asenath becomes especially well-liked among Christians. How it emphasizes spiritual transformation fits perfectly with Christian ideas about being born again and becoming new. The potential for reading it allegorically attracts theologians looking for Old Testament figures that point to New Testament truths. Christian art from medieval times often shows Asenath's story. Manuscripts with detailed illustrations depict her conversion moment, including the angelic visit and the miraculous honeycomb that appears. Her beauty and devotion serve as examples for Christian women to follow. The visual tradition helps keep her story alive for people living later. The Eastern Orthodox tradition creates its own way of understanding her. Byzantine theologians see in Asenath an example of theosis, the journey of becoming more like God. Her shift from pagan royalty to covenant mother shows what's possible for humanity when it comes to participating in the divine nature. Her story becomes instructions for climbing spiritually. Protestant reformers find Asenath's story again during the Renaissance period. Their focus on personal faith rather than institutional power connects with her individual conversion experience. Her face-to-face encounter with the divine appeals to reformed thinking about religious experience that doesn't need intermediaries. The Counter-Reformation brings Catholics back to being interested in her account. Jesuit scholars create complex allegorical readings, seeing her conversion as a pattern for missionary efforts. Her transformation from pagan ways to faith shows the Church's mission to bring civilization. The story gets used to defend the faith during a time of religious fighting. Modern Jewish academic work approaches Asenath with fresh interest. Scholars today recognize how important her story is for understanding ancient views on conversion and marriage between different groups. Her narrative gives us a window into how Jewish identity developed during the Hellenistic era. Feminist scholars from both religious traditions find Asenath fascinating. The active part she plays in her own conversion challenges assumptions rooted in patriarchy about women's spiritual abilities. The theological depth she shows when talking with the angel points to female religious authority that ancient texts rarely acknowledge. The movement promoting dialogue between different faiths takes up Asenath's story as a pattern for religious meetings. Her respectful way of engaging with traditions different from her own, while keeping her core beliefs intact, offers direction for religious pluralism today. Her story hints that conversion doesn't have to mean destroying someone's culture. Modern literature keeps exploring her account. Current novels, poetry, and dramatic works reimagine her life for audiences living now. Her wrestling with identity and finding where she belongs speaks to present-day concerns about multiple cultures mixing and religious variety. This princess from long ago addresses modern questions about faith and who we are, texts that were lost and then found again. The manuscript shows up in a library in Paris sometime in the 1800s. Scholars look at the Greek text with mounting enthusiasm. They see right away that this document holds something remarkable. The story about Joseph and Asenath comes out of centuries spent in obscurity, carrying fresh understanding of ancient religious thinking along with it. Finding it creates passionate scholarly arguments. Some authorities date the text to the 1st century, putting it at the same time as early Christian writings. Others push for it being written later, maybe in the 3rd or 4th centuries. The proof stays annoyingly unclear, making room for different ways to read it. Where the text came from proves just as puzzling. Some scholars think Jews wrote it, pointing to how well it knows Hebrew traditions and practices. Others claim Christians composed it, mentioning theological ideas that sound like New Testament writings. The question stays unanswered, adding to how intriguing the document is. How the manuscript got passed down shows a complicated history. Several versions exist in different languages, each one containing parts the others don't have. The Greek text differs a lot from Latin and Syriac translations that came later. These differences suggest scribes actively engaged with the story, each person copying it, adding their own touches. Finding it again changes how people understand ancient literature. Before this, scholars only knew Asenath from short mentions in the Bible. The longer narrative shows a sophisticated theological thinker at work. The text proves that ancient writers had impressive psychological understanding and skill with words. How the story is built follows classical patterns while mixing in distinctly religious parts. The author pulls from Greek Romantic writing, Egyptian wisdom teachings, and Hebrew religious thought. This blending creates something that had never existed before in ancient literature, a truly multicultural religious romance. The symbolism running throughout the text works on many levels at once. The tower where Asenath goes to be alone represents both physical separation and spiritual climbing. The honeycomb appearing during her conversion carries meanings connected to wisdom, divine speech, and spiritual feeding. Every part serves both the story and theological purposes. How the manuscript survived raises questions about who read it and why it existed. Someone valued this text enough to copy it and keep it safe through centuries when it could have been lost. The careful attention to details in the best manuscripts points to communities that treasured these accounts, but we still don't know who these communities were. The discovery affects broader understanding of ancient religious writing. The text shows that conversion narratives existed well before Christianity made them common. The sophisticated way it handles spiritual transformation suggests ancient religious thinking was more subtle than people previously thought. The argument about when it was written impacts how we interpret it significantly. If the text comes before Christianity, it provides proof that Jews were doing missionary work and cared about Gentile conversion. If it comes after Christianity began, it might show how Jews responded to Christian expansion. What's at stake in the scholarly debate goes beyond just academic curiosity. The geographical details in the text give hints about where it came from. The precise knowledge of Egyptian practices and places suggests someone who knew the region firsthand. The author shows intimate familiarity with palace procedures, religious rituals, and political structures. This accuracy points to someone Jewish or Christian who lived in Egypt as the author. How theologically sophisticated it is impresses people reading it today. The text wrestles with basic questions about divine revelation, religious conversion, and spiritual change. How the author handles these topics shows remarkable theological maturity. The work deserves to be recognized as an important contribution to ancient religious thought. That the manuscript made it through medieval times suggests it stayed relevant. Scribes wouldn't have put in the time and materials to copy texts they didn't think were valuable. The story apparently addressed concerns that went beyond when it was first written. Its themes about transformation and meeting the divine resonated across the centuries. Finding it again impacts biblical scholarship in major ways. The text gives fresh perspective on Old Testament narratives, offering different versions of stories people know. These variations help scholars understand how ancient communities interpreted and passed down religious traditions. The text becomes a view into ancient religious imagination. How it influences modern religious thinking proves substantial. The story's focus on personal religious experience appeals to how people think today. Its treatment of marriage between different faiths and religious conversion speaks to current concerns. The ancient text finds fresh relevance in modern settings. The scholarly work surrounding the text keeps growing. New translations come out regularly, each one offering fresh ways to understand what the story means. Commentaries dig into the text's historical, literary, and theological aspects. The rediscovered manuscript creates an entire field of academic research. The challenges of preserving the manuscript need ongoing focus. The ancient materials break down despite careful conservation work. Digital preservation projects make sure the text stays accessible to future scholars. The technology helping modern research also helps preserve ancient wisdom. How many different disciplines study this text reflects modern scholarly methods. Historians, theologians, literary critics, and archaeologists work together to understand how significant the manuscript is. Their combined work reveals how complex the text is and how it keeps mattering. Love, politics, and symbolic meaning. The romance between Joseph and Asenath works on many levels of meaning at once. Their personal love story reflects bigger themes about divine love and how humans respond. The individual transformation of two people becomes a symbol for cosmic reconciliation. Their marriage represents heaven and earth joining together, spirit and flesh united. The political aspects of their relationship can't be overlooked. Joseph's role as vizier makes his marriage a question of state policy. Asenath's royal family connections strengthen his authority while creating a bridge between Hebrew and Egyptian interests. Their personal joy serves larger diplomatic goals. Love and politics weave together in ways that make both stronger. Reading it allegorically shows deeper theological meanings. Joseph represents the divine bridegroom looking for his beloved. Asenath embodies the human soul, at first resistant but eventually responsive to divine love. Their courtship follows the classic pattern of divine pursuit and human yielding. The romance becomes a story about salvation. The cultural clash between Hebrew and Egyptian worldviews creates tension in the story. Joseph's belief in one God confronts Asenath's background of worshipping many gods. His foreign looks and customs challenge what she finds attractive. Her proud independence pushes back against his gentle authority. These conflicts mirror larger tensions between faith and culture. How Asenath's character transforms drives the story along. Her initial shock at meeting Joseph turns into curiosity, then fascination, and finally, total devotion. The change happens gradually, reflecting realistic psychological growth, but how quickly she converts suggests divine action within natural processes. The symbolic marriage ceremony carries meaning that goes past personal union. The joining of Hebrew and Egyptian represents opposing forces being reconciled. The bride's white clothing symbolizes purity and fresh starts. The groom's royal garments reflect divine authority and earthly power. Every element serves both literal and symbolic purposes. What their union means politically extends beyond immediate diplomatic benefits. Their marriage sets a precedent for future relationships between different faiths. How well their partnership works shows that love can bridge cultural gaps. Their happiness proves that being different doesn't have to prevent unity. Reading it allegorically transforms the lovers into archetypal figures. Joseph becomes the suffering servant who finds vindication through divine favor. Asenath represents nations called to recognize divine truth. Their union symbolizes the final reconciliation between God and humanity. The personal story carries significance for everyone. How the text treats beauty shows sophisticated thinking about aesthetics. Asenath's early concern with physical looks gives way to appreciating spiritual beauty. Joseph's attractiveness comes from divine radiance rather than just human features. The story suggests that genuine beauty starts in spiritual reality. The power balance within their relationship changes throughout the narrative. At first, Joseph holds all the benefits of position and divine favor. Asenath's conversion makes their spiritual status equal while her royal birth keeps her dignity intact. Their mature relationship reflects mutual respect and shared authority. What their love story means theologically challenges traditional religious boundaries. Their successful marriage shows that divine love can cross ethnic and cultural lines. The story argues for including people, rather than excluding them, in how we understand religious identity. Love becomes the main measure for spiritual acceptance. The writing skill of the author shows considerable ability in balancing many meanings. The surface story keeps readers interested, while deeper symbolic meanings reward close attention. The text works successfully on literal, moral, and spiritual levels all at once. Few ancient authors achieve such sophisticated literary blending. How psychologically realistic the characters are adds believability to the symbolic meanings. Asenath's emotional path from fear, through curiosity, to love reflects genuine human experience. Joseph's patience and gentleness make his divine role believable. The fantastic parts stay grounded in recognizable human psychology. The social criticism built into the love story challenges contemporary assumptions about marriage and identity. The text suggests individual choice should outweigh family tradition in matters of faith. The story supports romantic love over arranged marriage. These themes would have been revolutionary in ancient settings. The eschatological aspects of their union point toward future completion. Their marriage previews the ultimate reconciliation between divine and human, sacred and secular. The personal happiness they find suggests the joy waiting for everyone who responds to divine love. Their story becomes a glimpse of universal restoration. How their love story influences things extends beyond the immediate narrative. Their relationship serves as a pattern for later interfaith marriages in religious literature. The sequence of resistance, conversion, and union becomes a template for similar stories. Their romance establishes archetypal patterns that echo through the centuries. The artistic potential of their story keeps inspiring creative works. Their love crosses cultural boundaries while keeping distinct identities intact. The drama of their courtship gives rich material for artistic interpretation. Their union suggests love can overcome any obstacle when divine providence blesses it. Death and vanishing. The biblical narrative goes quiet about what happened to Asenath. After her sons are born and receive their blessing from Jacob, she disappears from the recorded account. This absence creates a puzzle that has confused readers for thousands of years. Her disappearance raises questions about how biblical storytelling works and what role women played in ancient narratives. The silence might show how the biblical author focused on patriarchal family lines. Once Asenath completes her main function as mother to Joseph's sons, her individual story becomes less important to what the narrative is trying to do. The text follows the male line of descendants, leaving wives and mothers in the background. This pattern repeats itself throughout Genesis. Some scholars think she died young, maybe during childbirth or from illness. Ancient death rates took many women during their childbearing years. Her death might have been too ordinary an event to deserve special mention. The biblical text saves detailed death announcements for major patriarchal figures. The writings outside the main canon offer different views on what happened to her. Some texts suggest she lived long enough to see her sons grow up and start their own families. Others propose she went back to Egypt after Joseph died, spending her last years in the land where she was born. These traditions try to fill the gap that biblical silence leaves. The possibility of royal burial deserves thinking about. As the wife of Egypt's vizier and daughter of a high priest, Asenath would have been entitled to fancy funeral rites. Her tomb might have been built following Egyptian practices, complete with burial goods and religious inscriptions. Such monuments could have lasted until modern times. Archaeological evidence provides tempting possibilities, but no definite answers. Several tombs from the right time period show evidence of foreign influence in how burials were done. Some show combinations of Egyptian and Near Eastern elements that might reflect marriages between different cultures, but none can be definitely connected to Asenath. The deliberate erasure theory suggests later editors remove references to her death and what she left behind. This hypothetical editorial process might have aimed to minimize foreign influence in Israelite traditions. The revision would have served ideological goals, emphasizing Hebrew identity over Egyptian connections. What her disappearance does for the story creates dramatic effect. Her absence from the narrative's ending makes readers focus on her son's destiny rather than what happened to her personally. The storytelling technique emphasizes what came from her life, rather than how it ended. Her influence continues through her descendants, even after her story stops. What her vanishing means theologically points toward different ways to understand it. Some see her disappearance as proof of divine protection, suggesting she was taken straight to heaven like Enoch or Elijah. Others read her absence as a reminder of human mortality and how temporary earthly relationships are. The feminist view of her disappearance highlights systematic pushing aside of women in ancient texts. Her removal from the narrative reflects broader patterns of erasing females in patriarchal literature. The story moves from her dramatic conversion to her son's importance, skipping over her individual agency and continuing story. The practical side of ancient storytelling might explain why she's absent. Oral traditions often focused on family line connections rather than complete biographies. How the story was preserved and passed down would have emphasized parts most relevant to the community's identity. Personal details about women might have been considered less essential. The mystery of what happened to her increases her literary power. Her disappearance transformed her from historical figure to archetypal character. The lack of closure makes readers imagine what happened to her next. Her legacy matters more than her individual fate. Comparing her with other biblical women shows similar patterns. Sarah, Rebecca, and Rachel all disappear from the narrative after completing their maternal roles. The text provides death notices for some, but not others. The inconsistency suggests individual stories were kept based on how relevant they were to larger theological themes. Speculation about her final years opens possibilities for creative interpretation. Some traditions suggest she became a teacher of Egyptian women wanting to convert to Hebrew faith. Others propose she served as a go-between for Hebrainal and Egyptian communities. Her unique position would have made her valuable for diplomatic purposes. How her disappearance influences later traditions proves significant. The absence of official information about her death let later writers develop elaborate theories about what happened to her. These speculations reflect the theological concerns of each generation, rather than historical memory. The modern fascination with her missing story reflects contemporary concerns about women's historical visibility. Her disappearance symbolizes the countless women whose stories have been lost to historical neglect. The search for her fate becomes a quest for female voices that patriarchal tradition silenced. The literary technique of her vanishing serves narrative purposes beyond simple leaving out. Her absence creates space for readers to put their own concerns and interpretations into the story. The gap in the story becomes a place where contemporary relevance can appear. Her disappearance paradoxically makes her present power stronger. The erasing of women in Scripture. The pattern shows up across biblical literature with troubling consistency. Women come onto the narrative stage, play crucial parts, then vanish without explanation. Their disappearances reveal systematic editorial choices that put male family lines ahead of female contribution. This literary archaeology exposes the ideological foundations of ancient storytelling. How erasure happens varies, but the result stays the same. Some women simply disappear from the narrative without any explanation. Others get brief death notices before fading from memory. Still others find their stories absorbed into their husbands' or sons' biographies. The techniques differ, but the marginalization remains consistent. The theological justification for this pattern draws on ideas about patriarchal authority and divine order. Ancient editors apparently believed that emphasizing male leadership served religious purposes. The focus on fathers and sons reflected broader social structures, where women's roles were defined mainly through relationships to men. What removing females from the narrative does for literature extends beyond individual stories. The systematic removal of female perspectives creates a distorted view of ancient religious experience. The resulting narrative suggests women played minimal roles in spiritual development. This impression goes against evidence from other ancient sources. Comparing this with contemporary ancient literature shows how unique biblical women's marginalization is. Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and Greek texts often feature strong female characters whose stories get full development. The biblical pattern of erasing females appears more pronounced than in surrounding cultures. The editing process likely happened over centuries, with each generation of scribes making choices about what to keep and what to leave out. The cumulative effect of these decisions created texts that systematically minimized female contribution. The process reflected changing social attitudes toward women's roles in religious communities. Archaeological evidence suggests women played more prominent roles in ancient religious practice than biblical texts show. Temple inscriptions, artwork, and ritual objects point to female religious leadership. The disconnect between archaeological and textual evidence suggests significant editorial intervention. The sociological factors behind erasing females include concerns about religious purity and cultural identity. Communities under pressure from surrounding cultures might have emphasized patriarchal structures to maintain distinctiveness. The marginalization of women could have served as a boundary marker between Hebrew and foreign traditions. The psychological impact of this erasure on female readers extends across generations. Women studying these texts encounter a religious world where their voices seem irrelevant. The absence of female models creates spiritual challenges that persist into modern times. The erasure continues to influence contemporary religious practice. The recovery project undertaken by modern scholars attempts to restore lost female voices. Feminist biblical criticism employs various methods to uncover hidden female perspectives. These approaches reveal the richness of women's religious experience that earlier editing obscured. The work of recovery continues to yield important insights. The hermeneutical challenges posed by erasing females require sophisticated interpretive strategies. Readers must distinguish between descriptive and prescriptive elements in texts shaped by patriarchal editing. The challenge involves separating divine revelation from human cultural limitation. This work demands careful theological reflection. The interfaith implications of erasing females affect religious dialogue and cooperation. Communities that have marginalized women's voices face challenges in contemporary contexts where gender equality is valued. The need to address this heritage becomes important for religious credibility and relevance. The literary analysis of erasure patterns reveals editorial techniques and priorities. The systematic nature of female marginalization suggests coordinated editorial policy rather than random omission. The patterns point to specific ideological commitments that shape how texts developed. Understanding these patterns illuminates the text's formation process. The historical reconstruction of women's actual roles requires careful attention to scattered evidence. Brief mentions, family line lists, and legal provisions provide clues about women's real experiences. The reconstruction project reveals a more complex picture than the main narrative suggests. Women's actual influence exceeded their textual representation. The contemporary implications of recognizing female erasure extend beyond academic study. Religious communities grappling with gender equality must address their textual heritage honestly. The recognition of systematic female marginalization creates opportunities for corrective interpretation and inclusive practice. The theological reflection on erasing females raises questions about divine revelation and human limitation. The tension between scriptural authority and recognition of cultural conditioning requires careful navigation. The challenge involves maintaining reverence for sacred texts while acknowledging their historical limitations. The educational implications of understanding female erasure affect religious instruction and formation. Students learning about biblical women need to understand both what the texts say and what they leave out. The fuller picture includes recognizing the processes that shaped how texts developed. This knowledge creates more informed and critical readers. The spiritual consequences of erasing females continue to influence contemporary religious experience. The absence of female models in sacred texts creates ongoing challenges for women's spiritual development. The recovery of lost voices becomes important for spiritual wholeness and religious authenticity. Asenath in modern eyes. The revival of interest in Asenath's story begins during the feminist movement of the 20th century. Modern readers recognize in her narrative themes that resonate with contemporary concerns about identity, choice, and religious freedom. Her story speaks to questions about assimilation, cultural authenticity, and the possibility of transformation that transcends ethnic boundaries. The literary renaissance surrounding her character produces novels, poems, and plays that reimagine her life for modern audiences. These works explore themes the ancient texts only hint at: the psychology of religious conversion, the challenges of intercultural marriage, and the price of abandoning one's birth culture. Contemporary authors find in her story rich material for exploring modern dilemmas. The feminist theological movement embraces Asenath as a model of female religious agency. Her decision to convert comes from personal conviction rather than male coercion. The story depicts her as an active participant in her own spiritual journey, making choices that determine her destiny. This interpretation challenges traditional readings that minimize women's religious autonomy. The interfaith dialogue community finds in Asenath's story a template for religious encounter. Her respectful approach to learning about Hebrew faith, while maintaining her dignity, offers guidance for contemporary religious conversations. Her willingness to change while preserving her essential identity provides a model for sincere religious inquiry. The story suggests that authentic conversion enriches rather than diminishes the convert. The multicultural movement sees in Asenath's experience a mirror of modern immigration and assimilation challenges. Her struggle to maintain authentic identity while adapting to new cultural expectations resonates with contemporary immigrant experiences. Her success in creating a hybrid identity that honors both backgrounds provides hope for modern multicultural families. The psychological study of her conversion process reveals insights into the nature of religious change. Her journey from rejection through curiosity to acceptance follows patterns recognized in modern conversion studies. The emotional stages she experiences mirror those documented in contemporary religious transformation. Her story provides a case study in the psychology of belief change. The artistic interpretations of her story multiply across various media. Contemporary artists find in her narrative rich visual and dramatic possibilities. Her beauty, transformation, and ultimate triumph provide compelling subjects for artistic expression. The story's archetypal elements translate effectively across cultural boundaries. The theological debates surrounding her story continue in modern contexts. Progressive religious thinkers emphasize her inclusion as evidence of divine openness to all peoples. Conservative interpreters focus on her complete transformation as evidence of necessary religious conversion. The story serves both universalist and particularist theological positions. The scholarly research into her historical context reveals the complexity of ancient religious and cultural interchange. Modern archaeology and anthropology provide new insights into the world she inhabited. The sophisticated nature of Egyptian-Hebrew relations in her time suggests her story reflects realistic historical possibilities. The liturgical revival of her story brings her narrative into contemporary worship contexts. Some religious communities incorporate her story into their worship cycles, using her conversion as a model for spiritual renewal. Her feast day appears in some liturgical calendars, acknowledging her role in salvation history. The counseling field finds in her story useful insights for working with clients struggling with identity issues. Her successful navigation of cultural transition provides a model for therapeutic work with immigrants and converts. The story's emphasis on personal agency and gradual change offers hope for those facing similar challenges. The comparative religion studies utilize her story to explore patterns of religious conversion across cultures. Her experience provides a case study in the universal aspects of religious transformation. The story's themes appear in various religious traditions, suggesting common human experiences of spiritual change. The literary analysis of her story reveals sophisticated narrative techniques that speak to modern readers. The psychological realism of her character development appeals to contemporary literary sensibilities. The story's use of symbolism and allegory provides rich material for literary interpretation and analysis. The popular culture adaptation of her story continues to evolve. Contemporary novels, films, and television series draw inspiration from her narrative. These adaptations often emphasize themes of female empowerment and cross-cultural understanding. The story's romantic elements appeal to modern audiences seeking meaningful love stories. The academic study of her story contributes to broader understanding of women's roles in ancient religious communities. Her narrative provides evidence for female religious agency in contexts where such agency was supposedly limited. The story challenges assumptions about women's spiritual capacity in ancient societies. The inspirational value of her story extends beyond religious contexts. Her transformation from privileged but isolated princess to influential mother and spiritual leader offers hope for personal growth and change. The story suggests that authentic transformation remains possible regardless of background or circumstances. The therapeutic applications of her story provide resources for those struggling with identity and belonging. Her successful integration of multiple cultural identities offers a model for contemporary multicultural individuals. The story's emphasis on personal choice and authentic transformation provides hope for those seeking to redefine their identities. The educational value of her story extends to various academic disciplines. Her narrative provides material for studying ancient history, religious studies, women's studies, and comparative literature. The story's complexity supports interdisciplinary approaches to understanding ancient cultures and their continuing relevance. The spiritual legacy of her story continues to inspire those seeking authentic religious experience. Her direct encounter with the divine provides a model for contemporary spiritual seekers. The story's emphasis on personal transformation over institutional affiliation resonates with modern religious sensibilities. The lioness forgotten. The circle closes where it began. The forgotten wife emerges from the shadows of history, her story finally told. Yet even in its telling, mystery remains. The lioness of the title reveals herself not as a fierce predator, but as a woman of quiet strength, transforming herself and her world through faith and courage. The metaphor of the lioness captures her essential nature. In Egyptian mythology, the lioness represented both destruction and protection, the fierce mother who defends her cubs. Asenath embodies this duality, destroying her former self to protect her new identity. The transformation requires both courage and wisdom, qualities the ancient world associated with the lioness. The forgetting that gives the story its poignancy reflects broader patterns of historical amnesia. Women's stories disappear first from official histories, their contributions minimized or ignored. Asenath's fate mirrors that of countless women whose influence shaped history, but whose names faded from memory. Her story becomes a symbol of all the forgotten women whose lives mattered. The shadow metaphor suggests hiddenness, but also protection. Shadows preserve what might otherwise be destroyed by harsh light. Asenath's story survives precisely because it remained in the margins of biblical narrative. The peripheral position that seemed to diminish her actually ensured her preservation. The shadow becomes a place of refuge and renewal. The echoes of her story continue to resonate through literature, theology, and popular culture. Her narrative establishes patterns that repeat in later stories of conversion, transformation, and interfaith marriage. The archetypal nature of her journey ensures its continuing relevance. Each generation discovers new meanings in her ancient story. The mystery that surrounds her fate adds to her literary power. The absence of closure forces readers to imagine her continuing story. Her legacy becomes more important than her individual destiny. The mystery transforms her from historical figure to archetypal character whose influence transcends specific circumstances. The faith that drives her transformation reveals the universal human capacity for spiritual growth. Her journey from pagan princess to covenant mother demonstrates that authentic change remains possible regardless of background or circumstances. The story offers hope for those seeking to reinvent themselves through authentic spiritual experience. The courage she displays in abandoning her former life inspires contemporary readers facing similar choices. Her willingness to embrace uncertainty for the sake of spiritual authenticity provides a model for those struggling with questions of identity and belonging. The story suggests that authentic transformation requires both courage and faith. The wisdom she demonstrates in navigating complex cultural and religious boundaries offers guidance for contemporary multicultural situations. Her ability to honor her heritage while embracing new commitments provides a model for those seeking to integrate multiple cultural identities. The story suggests that wise integration enriches rather than diminishes the individual. The influence she exerts through her sons extends her impact across generations. The tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh carry her legacy into the Promised Land. Her foreign birth becomes a source of strength rather than weakness for the Israelite community. The story demonstrates that diversity can strengthen rather than threaten communal identity. The memory of her story survives in fragments and hints, in apocryphal texts and rabbinical speculation. These scattered pieces suggest a narrative too compelling to be completely forgotten. The persistence of her story, despite systematic marginalization, testifies to its enduring power. Memory preserves what official history neglects. The redemption theme that runs through her story speaks to universal human longing for second chances. Her transformation from pagan princess to covenant mother represents the possibility of radical personal change. The story offers hope for those seeking to overcome their past and embrace new possibilities for the future. The legacy she creates through her faith and courage continues to inspire those seeking authentic spiritual experience. Her direct encounter with the divine provides a model for contemporary spiritual seekers. The story suggests that authentic transformation requires both personal commitment and divine grace. The silence that surrounds her later years creates space for contemporary imagination and interpretation. The absence of detailed information about her fate allows modern readers to project their own concerns and hopes onto her story. The gap in the narrative becomes a place where contemporary relevance can emerge. The lioness metaphor with which the story began finds its fulfillment in the woman who emerges from the shadows. Asenath proves to be fierce in protecting her new faith, courageous in facing uncertainty, and wise in navigating complex cultural situations. The lioness forgotten becomes the lioness remembered. The final meditation on her story suggests that being forgotten may be less important than being worthy of remembrance. Her life created ripples that continue to spread across the centuries. The influence she exerted through her faith, courage, and wisdom ensures that her story will continue to inspire long after her name might be forgotten. The echo of her story in contemporary literature, theology, and popular culture demonstrates its continuing relevance. Each generation discovers new meanings in her ancient narrative. The story's archetypal nature ensures its survival and adaptation to new contexts. The lioness forgotten becomes the lioness who cannot be forgotten. The mystery of her fate reminds us that some stories are more powerful for their incompleteness. The gaps in the narrative invite readers to become participants in the story's continuing creation. The forgotten wife becomes a character whose story we continue to tell, whose influence we continue to experience, and whose faith continues to inspire those who seek authentic transformation in their own lives.